Pretty good-looking day outside, and for the Colts, it's a really good day because it's another day off. Am I right in that? Back at it tomorrow in terms of practice in training camp. Just two left out in Grand Park, if I'm not mistaken, both of them in the evening. So the daytime sessions are complete, and the Arizona Cardinals will be in town hanging out. Joint practices, and then they get underway in terms of their tilt for the preseason. By the way, I want to thank everybody that sent tickets for the Colts preseason game against the Arizona Cardinals that is coming up this weekend at Lucas Oil Stadium. And I should probably announce now that we've reached the deadline in terms of for the schools that are going to be sending kids with a chaperone to the game. You know, obviously just setting all of that stuff up. They had told me that Monday would be their deadline. So several people have asked, not several, but a couple of people have asked today. It is much appreciated on the tickets, but if you were thinking about doing so, it is very much appreciated, the thought. But we are good at this point in terms of sending them forward. So thank you to those who donated tickets. We will make sure that as a result of that, in partnership with the United Way and two different schools, actually three schools, one an IPS school, one on the east side of Indianapolis, and one on the near north side of Indianapolis, all will be able to send their kids that would normally not get a chance to see the Colts play or see Lucas Oil Stadium. They're going to go down and enjoy the game and watch NFL football, which is very cool. So thanks for those who contributed for that. Good afternoon to you on, in fact, a Tuesday. My name is Jake Query. Jimmy Cook, Eddie Garrison here as well. We call it Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. And on a day when we will certainly talk about the Colts, Stephen Holder going to join us on the program, Zack Kefer as well. Let me begin with this. Jimmy, your baseball team sucks.
Yeah, not great, Jake. I kind of envisioned this on
How about those White Sox, baby?
on an island last week. But
I saw this coming. You know, I knew all along.
Well, for the record, and I'm
the 28 wins White Sox who have never scored more than 2 runs.
Eddie will back me up on this. Told you it was going to happen.
I was sure they were going to
told you it was going to happen.
Give up 12 to the White Sox and get blown by double-digit runs.
Didn't quite vision that margin of victory, but did tell you yesterday. Did tell you last week this would happen.
No, I've been saying all along. I knew. I mean, the Yankees. I mean,
I told you. We have tape.
I told Eddie the other day. I'm like, listen, when they play the White Sox and the White Sox come in, they're going to get beat by 10 runs.
I didn't tell you that part, but I did tell you they were going to lose.
Yes, you did tell me that.
Well, I mean, in baseball, you would expect
I have a coin flip. You're right. You're correct. You are correct.
But to get that, like,
I did not see them getting absolutely just stonewalled the way they did yesterday. They were 2 for 18 with runners in scoring position. For the second time in their history, they had 20 runners on base and did not score more than 2 runs.
White Sox, baby.
It was an unmitigated disaster.
New streak. Once it begins,
you also said they were going to lose 6 straight before their next win.
I did say 6.
This is the second or the third streak,
I didn't realize that they were going to be playing the Yankees that soon, Eddie. And I know that. But I'm telling you, the run begins now.
And it would be 2 more wins by the White Sox over the Yankees.
I'm sorry. In your peripheral vision, do you see just a small streak of light? Because that's the door opening for the wild card for the White Sox. And I'm not even a White Sox fan for what it's worth.
Are they? How many games back are they? Eddie's Marlins have a better chance to make the playoffs.
Well, they're 29 and 90, so they're only 61 games under 500, right? The time starts now, Jimmy. The push for next year begins now.
Are you sure they're only 61 games under 500, Jake?
Well, that again becomes the age-old question, right? They would have to win 61 games to become a 500 team. How's that?
I will say, removing the fanhood from it, if you're a White Sox fan and you're still going to those games, good for you for finally getting rewarded with your best offensive performance this season.
So let me ask you this. Shannon informed me yesterday that one of her Real Housewives of some county that's on one of those trash shows, she said, oh, by the way, one of my Real Housewives is going to be signing autographs at the White Sox game. And I thought to myself, who's a bigger glutton for punishment? The person going to get an autograph of one of the Real Housewives or the person going to see the White Sox? So which is like, and furthermore, do you feel bad for a D-list reality show celebrity that is escaping the grasps of their normal routine of being on one of these Andy Cohen rehash, shows and gets away from that because there's a big event where a Major League Baseball team is asking them to come and sign autographs, and it's the losingest team in the history of the sport that's having you come in late August. How many people are going to be there?
Well, 2 things. One, Haley Cook is a big fan of the Orange County Real Housewives. That is a frequent Thursday night viewing in the cookhouse. And second, what time do you and Shannon leave?
Yeah, no kidding, right? I don't know which housewife it is, but it's one of those.
Okay.
I just know this.
There are so many, by the way.
I know. One of the and they don't actually know each other. They just get together.
Right.
Like, there's okay, we're filming this Thursday, so everybody needs to get together. And then that Andy Cohen, they are constantly doing reunion shows where they sit around and they all talk about who fought with who and whatever else. I don't know.
Somebody fought with somebody didn't invite somebody to a party, somebody talked bad about somebody's kids on Instagram, and then they have the reunion.
Yeah. It's
generally how it goes.
Brutal, right?
Yep.
The good news for the Colts is that they are relatively healthy. We did see yesterday that they made a move at the running back position. That's because not Jonathan Taylor is injured, which is good. But at the backup spot, and I found this a little bit interesting because I do think that Jonathan Taylor is going to be, obviously, we know that, an epicenter for their offense this year. But even with that, you have to have, and you always are looking for depth, right? If you play fantasy football, when you're in fantasy football that, you're going through like your little draft process. And I'm not a huge fantasy football guy, but it does give you kind of a barometer of what happens just when you're trying to build a roster. And so you're looking at it and you're thinking, oh man, I've got to have at least like 3 or 4 running backs because they're fungible and somebody can get hurt or there's bye weeks and whatever else. And to a great extent, even on an NFL roster standpoint, there is an element of truth to that, where when you have a guy in Jonathan Taylor that is probably going to get 80% of your snaps or carries, but Trey Sermon has shown to be, I think, a pretty, a serviceable backup running back. Clearly, he was the number 3 guy a year ago that got elevated due to attrition. But he gets nicked up. He was the one real notable, I think, injury in preseason game number 1, and they wasted no time to go out and sign themselves another running back. The guy that also is of interest in this conversation would be Evan Hull, because when you're talking about injury, he was injured a year ago, never really got a chance to show his footing and what he could do after being drafted out of Northwestern, but I think they were very high on him. But Jimmy, it goes to show in today's NFL, the second that you get nicked up or there's the chance that you're going to be out, boom, you got to do what you can to basically overturn every rock and look under every leaf to see who's out there.
Well, and that position in terms of finding a diamond in the rough is easier than most because all you're asking for a backup running back is, hey, spell Jonathan Taylor for a couple of snaps here or there. Maybe you're saying, you know what, we're not going to worry about a run-first running back. Ironically enough, we want a pass-blocking running back, and you can go through the weeds and find different options in that regard. Zach Moss is really, though, despite the whole diamond in the rough analogy, because that's what teams usually like to do, is find a running back either in the draft or in free agency that you're not paying a ton of your cap percentage to and roll with it that way. The Colts obviously are one of those teams where they value and happen to be lucky enough to have one of the best players at that position in the sport on their roster, and they have taken care of him financially. What do you do after that? Well, Zach Moss was really an exception to that rule a year ago. I feel like he was the perfect storm of, oh, wait a second, this is your backup running back that all of a sudden winds up being poached a year from now because he popped off the charts and was very helpful to you. Generally speaking, you're going to see a fair amount of drop-off if you're a team that is paying a premium at running back. You're not taking a by-committee approach. You are taking this guy's just there for a couple of snaps to either be a pass block specialist or to be involved in the runner passing game. So I appreciate the Colts trying to continue to add depth where they can. I ultimately think, though, Jake, this is going to be still a heavy workload season for Jonathan Taylor.
Oh, no question.
And I think we're all in agreement on that aspect of it, but that's why...
I mean, the understudy to him is almost...
Yeah, exactly. It's a moot point. It doesn't really matter
now,
as long as it's an able body that is able to play the position competently in spurts.
They waived injured running back also Trent Penix. Okay, I don't know if that's relation to Michael or not, to be honest with you. I don't believe so. So they acquired off of the Chicago Bears, probably off waivers. So he'd been released by Chicago. Demetric Felton. Is it Demetric or Demetric Felton? But irrelevant. Here's the point, though. My favorite game to play. College, where he played in college. Eddie Garrison, your guest. Boom, go.
Is it D1? Let me ask you that first.
It is Division I, yes.
Okay. I will go with...
I will tell you this. It is not necessarily a running back but it is a prominent Division I program.
Prominent, you say?
I mean, it's a Power 5, and it's a program who has had notable players in the NFL, more notable than their actual accomplishment as a program, if that makes sense what I'm saying. For example, like Ole Miss. Ole Miss has had a lot of players in the NFL, but they're not necessarily a program that's consistently. This is a program that in my childhood was pretty prominent. The name of the university is still very prominent athletically, but not necessarily in football. For you guys, you would not think of it as a marquee football program.
Oh, man.
Okay.
But back in my day, they were a typical New Year's Day bowl team. Okay, Eddie, go. Boom.
The Bruins.
Of?
UCLA.
Jimmy, go.
Oklahoma.
Eddie, you looked it up. Congratulations.
No.
UCLA is correct.
I'm on Twitter.
Huh?
I'm on Twitter right now.
Okay, well, you could look up that he went to UCLA on Twitter.
I did not.
How did you know UCLA? What was the hint that gave it away?
Well, you said they were prominent in your childhood, and we wouldn't recognize them as a football school today. And they used to be in New York. I can't speak. New Year's 6.
We knew that. The real hint was going to be it is not a running back university, but it is now being coached by a former running back. And it's in L.A., by the way. I don't know if you know that about you.
There you go. That would have helped. That last part would have helped me.
So, yes. Now, another thing in terms of today, there's a lot to talk about. We'll get into the Colts, as I mentioned, with Stephen Holder. Item number 2. We are celebrating today an anniversary. We're all about anniversaries on this show. We're all about celebrating things. We're all about tradition. We're all about history. All of it, right?
Is it the night of your first date with Shannon?
No. And you know what's funny, Eddie? That day came and went, and about 3 weeks later, Shannon's like, by the way, you know what we totally missed? I'm like, what? She's like, June 8th. I'm like, June 8th. Oh, wait a minute. Because my mom's birthday is June 6th. So, no, it is not the anniversary. Jimmy, would you like to guess the anniversary that we're celebrating?
I don't have one, Jake.
It is prominent in the life of one Eddie Garrison. We are celebrating an anniversary today of something that is prominent in the life of Eduardo Garrison.
Is it a secret shop you guys opened in Illinois a year ago?
It's not like the third week of April, Jake. Come on now.
It is.
Both
it is not that. On this date, today is what, the 13th of August?
It is.
On this date in 1982, 41 years ago, and I remember this well because it would be probably 3 weeks after this, I vividly recall at Cub Scouts one day, Mrs. Curran, who was my Cub Scout leader, saying to my mom, oh, we went to a movie the other night. And my mom said, what's that? And she said, and it was complete trash. She labeled the movie as complete trash. And I love Mrs. Curran, and she was a great Cub Scout leader, Den 3 of Pack 282. But she has terrible taste in movies because 41 years ago today, the release of Fast Times at Ridgemont High, baby.
Woke up in a great mood. I don't know what the hell.
Now, I think, Eddie...
The clue of a parent being mad and saying complete trash led me to search Fast Times release date before you made the announcement, so I'm proud the context clues aligned
now,
there.
I think we've done this before, but we need to do it again because it's worth a repeat. On this show today, because we missed a couple of them, on this show today, Eddie, I think every bounce back, a song from Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
I agree with you.
And Eddie, if you had to pick one member of the Ridgemont High graduating class of 1981 or 82, because there are kids that are of different ages in the movie, but which one is the one that you most likely would have been friends with? Not the one that you like, not the character you like the most, but the character that more than anything else that you're like, that's the one that I would have been buddies with.
Well, Jeff Spicoli was not in the class of 82, was he?
He was. He was at least 81, right?
Yeah.
No. Wait a minute. He was 82 because Mr. Hand says, you'll find out next year. And he says, no, you're right, because he definitely has at least a year left because he says, as soon as I cruise history, I'm not coming near your side of the building. So he had at least 1 year left.
Yeah.
So he was class of 83.
Probably Brad.
Okay. Hard to argue that. He was big man on campus, right?
That and, nice guy, very reliable. He's trustworthy.
Well, he'll get you a job if you want.
Right.
At All-American. All he's got to do is talk to Dennis Taylor.
Yeah. He won't tell my parents if.
That is true. It'll just be your secret.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. I think Linda Barrett would have been mine.
Ah.
That's who I'd have been hanging with. But at any rate, in terms of the Colts, Jimmy, let's get back to that. With Arizona coming in, the thing that you're kind of most looking for or most expecting that we'll see, because as you go through the preseason, with each step of the way, you start to maybe get a little bit further into the playbook or what you were expecting. What's your biggest question mark? Not name corner. Your biggest question that you go, I still want to see more of that.
The timing of Anthony Richardson, I would say, is my biggest concern moving forward. And it's not even a label that is exacerbated by the preseason showing that he had, which was only 7 plays, and we've established that you can't really get an answer for what he is going to be based on 2 drives in the preseason. But if you're nitpicking about those 2 drives, it was the timing that he had, either a miscommunication on his part or Granson's part. Either way, twice it happens on that opening series. And regrettably, Jake, I don't think those answers are going to arrive in the preseason game. If we're going against the trends of Shane Steichen, I don't know that we'll see any starters of consequence on the offensive side of the ball, at least Anthony Richardson, you would think not, if we're going off of what he did last year. Now, maybe he views it as more important to continue to chip the rust off, and he will get some time when he didn't a year ago. I ultimately think, though, preseason game number 2 winds up being a skip step or an off day for the starters, and game number 3 is your dress rehearsal. That doesn't mean, though, questions can't still be answered. My attention now turns towards what happens in these joint practices, and I would hope that Shane Steichen is asking for as much situationally with the Cardinals as he can with timing for Anthony Richardson, getting the ball out quickly, making decisions when blitzes are coming, and deciding when he needs to go tuck and run or when he needs to try to, maybe he's bailing the pocket and throwing on the run. Either way, I want more situational challenges Anthony Richardson's way so he looks fresher than he did in that first preseason game, because I think definitively when you look at what he did in 2 drives that I've stated at the start of this whole montage of the Colts, you can't judge him and decide what he's going to be this year based on 2 drives. However, you can make an observation of how he looked, and he looked rusty. He looked like a guy that hadn't played in a professional setting in nearly a year. So I would think that the best way to get that rust off is by utilizing him in many passing situations against the Cardinals in joint practice. Are you, focusing on Richardson for just a second, are you of that same mentality that if we're going off of what Steichen did a year ago, which is Richardson didn't play in game 2 of the preseason, the joint practice has become all the more important for him getting the rust off and establishing himself?
Yeah, because I think the joint practices are important anyway, because this is, and you made this point yesterday, Jimmy, this is the new trend. The joint practices are going to become, as we continue to see the owners wanting to add games to the NFL calendar, and I understand why people, it makes them a lot of money. But as they take away preseason games, this is the makeup, the make good for that, right, is having the joint practices. And that probably is more beneficial because you're less likely to see collision injury. Now, maybe that increases the odds of injury in the regular season because bodies aren't conditioned. I get all of that. But, yes, I agree that.
If you're worried about the collisions, by the way, go watch a joint practice because those
right.
things, I mean, that's where you still see those viral clips of people getting into skirmishes and, everybody getting angry with testosterone filling everybody. Like it's to a T of aggression in those joint practices. So I get it. I think that's kind of I don't want to fully label it an old school thought, but it's not like if you were to eliminate the preseason games and replace them with joint practices that the level of physical conditioning and training, whether it's on or off the field being in the weight room, isn't still taking place. Jake, I think if you gave truth serum around the NFL for coaches, most of them would tell you they value joint practices more because they're able to scheme up situational things, game script things more efficiently and get the more specific raw data that they need for their team than you would in a preseason game.
Now, here is, for me, the thing now about Anthony Richardson. I always emphasize this point. We don't know these players personally. We don't know what their personality is away from, behind closed doors. We don't know what their interests are. We don't know what their level of maturity totally is. But you can tell tendencies. There are little things that you can see that give you, not gospel, but can give you glimpse of what a player and who a player is going to be or can be. In the case of Anthony Richardson, it is very easy to look at his college career at Florida and say, wait a minute, if this guy is a face of the franchise NFL quarterback, then why at Florida was he winning 7 games and not 10? Why was he not? If he is an unbelievable unicorn type athlete that can do almost previously unseen things in the combination between his speed, his size, and his arm strength, then why were we not seeing Cam Newton level production? Cam Newton, if I'm not mistaken, won a junior college championship. He won a college national championship. He took his team to the Super Bowl. He was a dynamic player. Andrew Luck took Stanford to, big-time bowl games and double-digit wins and was, could slide in the pocket and do things. You saw the tendencies. And you don't necessarily see that on the film, quote-unquote, of Anthony Richardson at Florida. But then you look at the players around him, and you look at the fact that talking point would be very easy for him to fall back on. Hey, who was I throwing to? What kind of protection did I have? Look who I was playing against. I'm at Florida. I'm playing every week against Alabama and Auburn and Georgia and Tennessee and, legit NFL prospects every single game. You want me to look better? Yeah, I could have gone to Alcorn State. I could have gone to, play in the Big 12 where defense is completely non-existent. Literally. I mean, you go play in the Big 12 as a quarterback, and you might as well be Jeff Spicoli at the arcade because you're just playing pinball. Just go wherever you want, right? Just let it rip. But Richardson never leaned back on or to my knowledge, pushed into that. He is a guy, through his body language, through his actions, to this point, I think has been very, very impressive and mature. He didn't get drafted and walk across the stage and flash the money sign like Johnny Manziel, who had been playing pinball, mind you, even though he was in the SEC. And when he got into the NFL, had this bravado about him that blew up in his face, right? He didn't have that kind of a swag about him. From the time Anthony Richardson has been drafted here, I think he's been humble. I think he has, at least on the outside perception, it appears as though he has been willing to learn whatever they have given to him. I've heard no sign, no indication of him ever saying, like, I'm good with that. I mean, whatever they've thrown his way, okay, I'll work at it. Yes, I understand that he got hurt last year and that cost him games, but that might not be a bad thing because what is the discussion that we have about quarterbacks in the NFL in general? The discussion, at least until 4 or 5 years ago, and maybe Peyton Manning was the big change here, but for a long time it was the best quarterbacks sit and watch for like a year and learn. And with Anthony Richardson, he was going to get maybe even thrown in too early, and then he had to back out and sit and learn because of the injury. That might not be a bad thing. And we may look back 10 years from now and go, the best thing that happened to that guy was he had to sit and just watch. And watch a guy like Gardner Minshew that I think was a pretty good pro and probably gave him. And by all account now with Joe Flacco, what do you hear? You hear about Anthony Richardson is learning from Flacco. He's going over and he's asking him questions. He's the first guy to come over when Flacco came off the field and go over, this and that with him. His leadership, I think, has been good so far because he hasn't been a leader, Anthony Richardson, in terms of I don't see him necessarily being the guy that's out there like a DeForest Buckner or a Shaq Leonard was, rallying everybody up, but he's kind of a leader in the fact that he has been willing to learn and willing to absorb and not push back. To me, that's impressive. And sometimes the greatest asset you can have in any walk of life, the greatest asset you can have is to know where your own ceiling is and then try to break through it, as opposed to telling others what your ceiling is and listing it with more floors above than you really have. And I think he's done all those things. And to me, it's very encouraging. Now, does that mean it's going to translate into him being able to throw dart pinpoint passes? Does that mean that he's going to be able to immediately do checkdowns and throw to a guy where you go, oh my gosh, Patrick Mahomes is the only guy I could see that can make that play? Does that mean that he's going to know exactly when to tuck and run and then use his legs to extend play? I don't know any of that. We don't know any of that, and we don't truly know who he is. But on the surface, at first glance or first year's glance, I think you have to be very encouraged with this guy because he has, by all account, conducted and handled himself in the ways that you would want. He changes people's tires on the sidelines. He takes pictures when he's out in public. He seems like a nice guy. Doesn't mean that we know him. But to me, all signs point to the right direction. And I have to remind myself also, I was a total train wreck until I was like 30. So and I had great upbringing, great coaches, great parents, everything. And I was still a train wreck till I was probably 28. I mean, not literally, but I was immature,
sure.
Right? And I can't imagine being given that kind of money and that kind of the level of that amount in my fingertips at that age. It would be very easy for people to handle it the wrong way. I think he's handled it the right way. But now we got to see that translate into what happens. Now, when Anthony Richardson was available and the Colts took him, there were others that were in the discussion. And I can tell you right now, on the other side, I'm going to spell out for you the quintessential, lock it down, drop the mic reason definitively, without question, without argument, why we absolutely got to break in Indianapolis with Anthony Richardson being the quarterback. The level of break and relief that we got, I'm going to say something to you folks in Indianapolis and illuminate something to you in Indianapolis where you are all going to rejoice. Pull over 465 because it's going to be dangerous to drive with both hands in the air when you yell out hallelujah with what I tell you about why Anthony Richardson was the best option at the time and why we absolutely avoided a crisis in Indianapolis. I'll tell you what it is next. all day as part of the celebration of 41 years of Fast Times at Ridgemont High, bumper music from the movie. And then, Eddie, if you could, recall the scene in the movie where it's played.
This is the intro.
It's first day of school, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I recall vividly during the NFL draft a year ago, I was doing the morning show with Kevin and Mark, and leading up to the draft, there were 4 quarterbacks that were constantly discussed, and the Colts were drafting. Everybody knew they were going to take one. And those 4 were Bryce Young of Alabama, C.J. Stroud of Ohio State, that was the one that I kept saying I love C.J. Stroud.
The Ohio State, Jake. Get it right.
Mm-hmm. You know, I've been to that Ohio University also in Athens. Go there for Halloween and go to the Nick or the Dugout. Let me tell you, the fact that my parents let Brad Fields and I drive their junior year of high school for a weekend unchaperoned, still one of the great upsets in modern history. And then the other 2, Will Levis, Anthony Richardson. Now, I was told during the combine by somebody pretty inside, they're like, look, I can tell you this much. Jim Irsay loves Will Levis, loves him. And I thought that's who they were going to go with. And then Levis started dropping. And obviously, you know, he ended up in Tennessee. They already had a couple of quarterbacks in Tennessee. Levis finally got his shot, played okay. And you obviously know, as we just spelled out, what happened with Anthony Richardson. Now, sometimes people can have great ideas. Sometimes people can be innovators. Sometimes people have something that even the least likely of people can come up with an idea that you say, okay, I can see where you're going with that. For example, yes, we're going on the way back here, but Kramer on Seinfeld was, I wouldn't say of the mainstream, but occasionally he came up with a decent idea.
You know, I got a great idea for a cologne. It's called The Beach. You spray it on, and it's just like you came home from the beach.
A cologne that smells like the beach. I can't believe I'm saying this, but that's not a bad idea.
Now, you know where you obviously get the beach is in Florida, which is where the Colts turned. Yes, I realize Gainesville, not on the beach, but in Florida for Anthony Richardson. That means that the Colts, by taking Anthony Richardson, decided to not take Will Levis. And yes, a lot was made out of it during the course of the draft that Will Levis was somebody who would put mayonnaise in his coffee, and it became all the rage during the draft process, and we later found out that that actually was maybe kind of a joke, but that Will Levis didn't actually put mayonnaise in his coffee, but one time that he and his girlfriend were going to drink coffee, and they were out of cream, and as a joke, he put mayonnaise in it, and then it morphed into this whole thing. But nonetheless, as we know, mayonnaise is the most disgusting and horrific thing on the planet. It is the devil's spawn. It is completely horrific. And lo and behold, we could have had in Indianapolis, we could have dealt with this crap that came out today.
Luscious. Eggy. Smell like greatness. Will Levis, number 8, Parfum de Mayonnaise.
That has to be a joke, right? So today it's announced that Will Levis, quarterback of the Tennessee Titans, has a cologne that he has partnered with Hellman's, I believe, with to smell like mayonnaise. The Will Levis number 8 scent that smells like mayonnaise, or in his case, as he says, it smells eggy, luscious, and like greatness. Number 1, I don't believe this for a second. I think this is 100% a publicity stunt. We're in Indianapolis. We're talking about it. Kudos to them. Hook, line, and sinker. But yet I don't think it's actually real. But just the fact that it is forcing me right here on the radio to talk about mayonnaise, kudos to them. But this is what we avoided. We avoided, even if there's an inkling of possibility that this is the case. Can you imagine going to a Colts game? It's bad enough when you go to a Colts game that they can't get the roof to open or close or whatever the hell's wrong with it.
It's open right now, by the way.
So they got it fixed.
Yes, I should have hit the breaking news sender for that, but
now, okay, here's the thing, though. Do you have the breaking news sounder? Because go ahead and play it, because I got breaking news. Lucas Oil Stadium is working now, and they're able to open it. And the only reason that is because the SkyTram ride at the zoo is broken. Because you can't have both working at the same time. This we know. And I know for a fact because Ryan Robertson, my buddy, over the weekend sent me a thing that was like I was next in line to ride the little SkyTram at the zoo, and once again, it broke. It always does, right? It always does. You go to the Indianapolis Zoo, and I love the zoo. I love the animals. I love everything about the zoo. But you go to the zoo, and you take this tram ride, and you get a free meet and greet with the Indianapolis Fire Department. It is a rite of passage, okay? But
do they sign autographs too?
They do, and photos.
That's good.
But now that we have the roof working, so these are the things that we talk about here. Can you imagine going to a Colts game on a day when they can't open the roof, so the roof is closed, and everybody's walking around, and you basically, the people around you smell like one of three things, okay? Lee jeans, Camel Lights, or mayonnaise. Are you kidding me? That's what we avoided that. We got away from that. Thank goodness. This has to be a publicity stunt, right? This isn't real, right?
I mean, there was a purchase portal online. They sold out, apparently. They're going to restock tomorrow at 10 a.m. I understand you can manipulate facts, and maybe that's all not true, but I want to believe there's a world where a bunch of crazy Titans fans just randomly bought 8-ounce bottles of mayonnaise perfume.
Zero chance this is real, right?
It's got a purchase portal. I mean, anybody can make a website, but it's
sold out.
There's no way this is real.
I mean, you'll find out in a couple of days when they start shipping.
Free delivery on all orders.
Okay, how much?
And a 6-inch sub. Wow,
how much is a bottle?
$8.99.
Yeah.
Oh, $8. Yeah.
So did people actually make it? There's no way that this is real. I'm telling you right now.
You told us, peek behind the curtain. You told us off the air that many an individual had brought this to your attention because they know of your love of cologne. So hypothetically...
No. They know of my hate of mayonnaise.
Okay, well, I thought it was the other way because they also know you have the cologne collection. Okay, so it was a troll job. My apologies.
Yes.
Well, if
everybody and their brother has sent it to me.
If there's people that know that you love cologne, couldn't somebody then go and as a gag gift buy you the Will Levis allegedly real Perfume Day mayo?
I just downsized my cologne shelf. I just downsized. You guys know this.
So you have room.
I showed you the after. I showed you the after photo, and I got rid of.
You
15 bottles of cologne.
You purged.
You opened up room for this one.
No. Zero chance.
Look, I understand.
First off, because it's fake, and secondly, even if it wasn't, there's zero chance I would do it.
I understand that while we are a team of camaraderie here on the company, that not of this cologne. This is a travesty, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form associated with this, but there is a clear chasm between myself and Jake in regards to is mayo
everything,
delightful
right?
Or is it? Yes, but especially in this instance, as a Hoosier, born and raised, tenderloins and mayo go hand in hand with one another. That's just I don't know. That's what I use. It's always on the side. Always love a delicious Indiana breaded tenderloin with a nice little dab of mayo on there. I understand that repulses you, but we are united in this cause. I don't need a fragrance of mayo to smell it, God forbid, on the regular, let alone in an enclosed stadium. That's the part that I agree with you, Jake, we should be thanking our lucky stars for, because let's say it is real, and then the roof's closed or won't open. You are stuck to your point with this third scent from hell of mayonnaise-based cologne from sweaty football patrons.
Let me tell you what is. I just want you to close your eyes and envision this.
All right, I got it. Yep.
And I get the art. I get the fact that we have a state-of-the-art stadium that was more publicly subsidized than any building in the history of United States sports at the time of its completion, and we paid an additional like $113 million for a roof that, like 10 times a year, we open if it works. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Understood.
Got that window too.
But I want you to imagine that you're at a Colts game, and it's a big game. It's a big game. They're playing the
Buffalo Bills.
Big game. We're not even go playoff game. It's a playoff game.
All right.
They're hosting in a playoff
rematch.
Game,
nice.
Right? But I'm wanting you to imagine this as if Will Levis is the starting quarterback of the Colts.
How'd they get there? How'd they get to the playoffs? Who'd they pay off?
They handed off to Jonathan Taylor a lot. And so they're in the playoffs, and they're taking on the Buffalo Bills, and everybody's excited, but it's cold outside, and so they decide to close the roof because it actually has been frozen since the 2nd of September, the last time it was opened. And so you go to the game, and you are pumped up. And you go, and it's halftime, and the Colts are leading 14-3, and you're like, oh, my gosh, they're going to be another step closer to the Super Bowl. And who doesn't love this scenario, right? And so, but you're sitting in the upper levels of the Lucas Oil Stadium, and now you want to go down because you're meeting a friend who you just found out is at the game and you haven't seen him since college. And so you're going to go down, you're going to have a beer together, and you're going to talk about how wonderfully exciting this is with the playoffs and everything else. And so you get on the escalators of death, and you ride them for 45 seconds.
Could be 3 seconds if they break.
You're looking true. And you're looking down at the bottom of the escalators as they are going down, and you realize, wait a minute, these things are eventually going to end in this pool, this sea of humanity of other people that are also meeting friends and everything else. But Will Levis is the quarterback of the Colts, and we are indoors, and there's been a little bit of sweating going on in pre-gaming anyway. And now everybody has hit themselves with a quick spritzer of mayonnaise cologne. And you're getting ready.
Like greatness.
No, there's nothing greatness about it. It's eggy and luscious. And that's what the escalators of death. And so now you're saying, and if it's me, I'm bailing. I'm bailing over the side of the escalator, taking my shot here, right? No chance. Absolutely horrific. How can you like mayonnaise? It's egg white with pickle juice in it. Horrible.
I don't know how to describe it. It's delightful. Like when it's used properly, not with coffee and not in a fragrance form, but just a little tiny bit on a burger. It's got a nice little lettuce, tomato, cheese, and a little bit of mayo on it.
They've added some tart lemon and parsley.
Also, they sometimes turn them into like sriracha mayo, which has a little nice kick to it, a little spice.
By the way, I don't know if the American Dairy Association does this at the Indiana State Fair, but there are a lot of people that use mayonnaise when making a grilled cheese.
No.
Yes.
No.
Instead of using butter, they put mayo on the bread.
And I'm just telling you, first off, clearly the American Dairy Association uses butter.
Correct.
No way that they're going to use mayonnaise. First off, because it's against the law. Secondly, because it's horrific. And third, because the idea of the American Dairy Association is to use all dairy products.
I understand, Jake.
Not the horrific nature of the devil spawn.
Shout out to the fine folks at Fire by the Monon. It's a nice restaurant, as you would expect, right on the Monon in Broad Ripple. And if you get it to go, you should eat there, by the way, just go, sit and get a table. But if you get it to go, the tenderloins are in like a medium-sized pizza box. They're massive. And if you order it the way I do, you get their signature sriracha mayo on there, and it is delightful. It is. Oh, it's so good.
Let me tell you something. Not even that Miracle Whip. I wouldn't even go with that. Like, if you can't afford the entire cologne, I wouldn't even go with the Miracle Whip cologne, right? Because how can you trust any cologne that is advertised as this, right? How can you trust any cologne that uses... Listen to the music in the background. That alone tells you it's a fraud.
Luscious. Eggy. Smell. Like greatness.
That clear. This is Saturday Night Live skit.
Will Levis.
Now,
number 8. Parfum.
I'd rather go with the genius of simply this.
I got a great idea for a cologne. It's called the Beach. You spray it on, and it's just like you came home from the beach.
A cologne that smells like the beach. I can't believe I'm saying this, but that's not a bad idea.
By the way, Stephen Huller is going to join us mercifully coming up here in about 15 minutes. I will simply say this as well. I am stunned at this point, and maybe I've missed out and somebody's done it, but when you are at a NASCAR race and the cars are going past you and they're going off of the straightaway into the turn, and you can smell the weird combo of like the burnt oil with the rubber that comes with it. There's almost like a sweet tinge to it. I'm not saying it's a pleasant smell. I'm shocked, though, that no one has come out with a NASCAR cologne that smells like that. No.
Like greatness.
I'm telling you, not that.
I mean,
I'm
it's
stunned.
clearly, the ad, though, itself.
It's clearly in jest.
Yeah, it's a Saturday Night Live, as you point
100%.
out, parody of the eau de parfum from
And the
whatever
fact that
Macy's.
it's $8, there's no way. Can we find anybody that actually ordered this and got like a confirmation of order?
If it's anything like crazy sellout purchases of the past, there's going to be somebody on Twitter posting a picture of the box.
I'm telling you
that they
right
got
now,
from
what
the mail.
they did is they put that out there. They partnered with Hellman's. They knew that everybody was going to talk about it everywhere. They just got Hellman's mentioned like 10 times on radio, 250 miles away, home run, PR stunt, And then anybody that clicked on it to buy it immediately got a thing that said, sorry, we're sold out, but we will. So there was not a bottle sold anywhere. And then in like a month, we're going to find out that it's kind of like those LeVar Ball tennis shoes. Remember those?
The big baller brand?
Big baller brand, baby.
The $500 slides that no one ever actually got an order of, right?
There's another layer to this story, Eddie, where we surprised Jake with a bottle of this. But the downside, but the downside of it is I don't know that I want the studio to smell like that the entire day. Like that's the risk reward there.
I'm telling you right now. Trust me, I love my colognes, and sometimes they give Eddie a headache, but that one would actually just simply make him vomit. Now, obviously, this song plays twice in the movie. 41 years ago today, the release of Fast Times. One of them where
the Pool Shack, right?
the Pool Shack's one, and then the other one where you got a FaceTime call.
That's right.
When I called you from and FaceTimed you from the Point, which
That's
is
right.
the dugout of Encino, California Little League. And then it was very confusing. The diamonds are all there's like 8 diamonds that are all, you've seen the way those work. I mean, a bunch of diamonds in one complex. And I was able to figure out by pulling up the video of, and trust me, I watched it 6 times, of the scene with, Stacy and Ron Johnson. And I was able to figure out which dugout it was that is the Point. And then I couldn't find my way out of the Little League complex.
That was funny.
Was walking around aimlessly, and people were like, can we help you? Yeah, I'm just trying to find my way out. What car are you in? I don't know. It's a rental car. I can't remember. We got a guy here that's on something. Eddie, in terms of your high school experience, one of your high school classmates that you shared a weight room with, unfortunately today suffered an injury in his rookie campaign, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. Tyrone Tracy, who we've had on the program before, of course, he started his career at Iowa collegiately. Then he transferred to Purdue for his final 2 years of college eligibility. Today, local reporters in New York saying that he suffered a lower leg injury. They had to halt practice, and he had to be carted off, and they put an air cast on his lower leg, and it's coming out now that it was an ankle injury, and he's being evaluated for the severity of that. So thoughts and prayers are with Tyrone and his family, as hopefully it's nothing too serious, and he's able to get back on the field during his rookie season.
Have you ever had a really bad ankle sprain?
Yes.
I think, have you ever had any broken bone like in your foot?
No.
At the outset, a sprain is almost worse. It is terrible. I mean, when I played basketball, I used to sprain my ankles all the time. And a really bad sprain, especially one of those high ankle sprains, is really, really tricky and difficult to come back from. I also broke essentially my pinky toe, fifth metatarsal, I think is what it's called. And it was rough, but I'm telling you, like, it almost felt like that healed faster.
How'd you manage that one?
That was the also playing basketball. I came down from a rebound and landed on another player's foot, and then my foot slid off and hit it, and it broke. And actually, initially, I had a sprain, and then I had, since you asked, in the dorm where I lived, I was on the upper bunk, and I fell asleep, and I got up in the morning and had forgotten about it. I kid you not, and jumped out of the bunk, and that took it from a fracture to a break.
Man.
To this day, when it rains out, I can feel it. I know that sounds weird, but it's true. Stephen Holder, Not Weird, does join us next. Eddie, the scene in which this is featured in Fast Times?
Mom says go wash the pool, or go clean the pool, I should say.
Your friends use it too. Correct. Brad, what would you say if I asked you to put these flowers in the back of the cruising vessel? I'd say, who's Ron Johnson? Joining us now, and I'm sure thrilled to be doing so on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line based on that introduction, but I'm going to first and foremost get to the meat of the matter of the NFL. A couple of big stories today. We had just talked about the fact that Eddie's classmate from Decatur Central is going to be coming back from now an ankle injury with the New York Giants. J.J. McCarthy, the quarterback out of Michigan, has a torn meniscus. Is that right, Eddie?
Yes, he's expected to have surgery. Timeline to be determined.
And Will Levis has apparently, and this is what I'm going to bring in Stephen Holder with. Stephen, I'm sure you've seen by now, Will Levis allegedly has a mayonnaise-inspired cologne called Will Levis 8 that has come out. It's $8. This is 100% a hoax and publicity stunt, and there is no such thing, correct?
I hope so. But regardless, this shows why Will Levis is completely undraftable. He should never have been drafted.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you ever had doubts about this guy, right? I mean, what are we doing? Listen, I do applaud the sense of humor, but gross.
Yeah, now here's the thing, and listen, I'm a comfortable enough guy that I will let people know this peek behind the curtain, and then Stephen, you can confirm that this is actually true. There was a time where you and I went to a Pacer game, and the next day I texted you and said, not to be creepy, but what cologne were you wearing, correct?
Yes, it was not mayonnaise-inspired cologne, to be clear.
Right. But I was like, I like that cologne you had on. What cologne were you wearing? And you told me, and I said, okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate it. And then that became like the 47th.
Or anything, but
right. I have a problem with those. Okay, let's begin with this. Takeaways from preseason game number 1. Your overall takeaway is what?
I mean, I was kind of uninspired, to be honest, and I don't mean that to be, sort of a projection about the 2024 Colts. It's not. I don't go into preseason games expecting to get a sense of what the team's going to be like that year, because they tend to be misleading. But that being said, I did think when you watch the Broncos, for example, like they had a lot of offensive success. It doesn't necessarily mean much. It may or may not even carry over. It probably won't. But it sure was nice, to see them move the ball if you're a Broncos fan. And you saw I'm talking about from at least part of the starting unit earlier in the game, not later in the game when the Colts did move the ball later. But I'm talking about early on. Their first offense didn't move the ball that much, right? And defensively, they were fine defensively. Talking about the Colts starters, I thought they were fine. They got the turnover. So they did their job. Offensively, they just didn't get a lot going. But again, what are they really even trying to do, right? They could have gone, for example, for that fourth down that they were faced with on, I believe, the second possession. I think they got a 3-and-out to start. Then they, I think, converted the first down or two. Then had a 4th and 2, I want to say, after Kylan Granson's reception. And I'm thinking at that point, okay, well, who cares? It's preseason. Just go for it. Get Richardson a few more reps. And Steichen promptly sent out the punt team, which told me he had no interest in having his starters play any further in that game. So that's fine. But I guess I didn't form any real hard and fast opinions from that game, just because it kind of was what it was.
Stephen, we'll begin with the tight end position. If you had to predict it now, or simply look at it, at this point, it appears as though the guy that may become the odd man out is who?
Well, I'll start by saying that I'm thoroughly underwhelmed. Thoroughly underwhelmed. And I'm not saying I had super high expectations. Well, I'm not saying my expectations were incredibly high, but I thought, or I hoped at least, that by now we would be getting at least some sense of what they are going to be at that position. And right now, I just think what we have is kind of the same as what we had last year, frankly. I mean, Jelani Woods in particular has not been the difference maker I thought he could be. So that's disappointing. Anyway, The odd man out. Oh man, it's hard to say. I think that I don't know. I got to think that I got to think that I'm not saying Jelani Woods is on the bubble, but I'm just saying his place or his place on the depth chart is certainly not what he hoped it would be.
So we've got, just for those that are listening, Stephen, I mean, I think most know this by now, but you got Kylan Granson, you got Drew Ogletree, you've got Mo Alley Cox, you've got Jelani Woods, and you've got Will Mallory. Those are the five, right? Yeah. To me, they all are like a 6 on a 1 to 10 scale, right? Or a 7. I mean, none of them are outstanding. None of them are terrible. I don't know that anybody has separated a skill set that appears to be different than the other 4. And Woods was kind of the clubhouse leader, it was thought, going in, but nobody has separated, right?
Yeah, and the other thing about Woods, not to beat up on him, I really am not trying to, but I do think they have draft capital invested in him. He's a third-round pick, so that comes with some expectations. And what I'd say is that his training camp has been pretty uninspiring. That is a problem. So that compounds what's already a difficult situation. I guess I was struggling to kind of determine who's the odd man out because honestly, they're all lumped in together right now. To be completely honest with you, I was talking to a colleague earlier, and I said this. I said if they had the lineup in play today, I feel like Mo Alley Cox would probably get the most snaps at that position right now. Him and Kylan Granson, which tells me that's exactly where they were last year. So nothing's changed. I got lots of Colts fans during this offseason, when the Colts were when they were looking for the Colts at least to make some big roster moves and were thinking about salary cap. I had fans asking me all the time, like, why don't they cut Mo Alley Cox? That's $6 million right there. We don't need him. Are you sure about that? Because I actually think he's going to play quite a bit unless something changes right now. So anyway, I guess Drew Ogletree, just by default, is kind of a guy who he's kind of duplicated in Mo Alley Cox a little bit. So, and obviously he has some receiving talent, but Will Mallory has maybe more upside there. Kylan Granson obviously fills that role. I think Drew Ogletree, his skill set a little bit, it sort of works against him a little bit, I guess, if you're trying to pick one guy to eliminate from this battle right now. But it's way too early just because no one's really distinguished themselves, in my opinion.
Stephen Holder is our guest. He covers the Colts for ESPN.com, and he joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Stephen, you brought up the fact that you had seen in your mentions or heard from Colts fans wanting to view somebody like Mo Alley Cox as expendable, and I get what you're saying if they're sure about that because somebody has to play the position, but doesn't that speak to the larger problem that you've called for, that I've called for, that Jake has mentioned many times as well, about the fact that in the Shane Steichen offense, the tight end that they want there is not currently on the roster? Like, you'd be willing to give up a $6 million savings, at least Colts fans would, Mo Alley Cox, because they know that they have seen all there is to see with him. Isn't that at root the larger issue with that position group post Jack Doyle that still has just not been solved?
Well, I would agree. We've seen the ceiling of Mo Alley Cox. I think we know very clearly what Kylan Granson is. That is not a negative statement in either guy, right? That's not a negative.
Sure, they're solid players.
I don't have a negative perception of either guy, right?
Sure.
Right. But I agree. We know what they are. The question is, can you find someone that is just a better package overall? And to this point, they have not found that. So
do you feel like we're destined for two? We joked about this last week, how with Chris Ballard, every offseason, it appears that everybody is looking at the same thing, be it pundit or be it fan, of, man, that position group looks weird. I don't know why the cornerback room's empty or the wide receiver room appears to be bare. And then Chris Ballard will joke about it in the offseason, like Eddie pointed out he did last year. Oh, that was on me. It feels like that's destined to happen with two position groups this year, definitively. Tight end, and then whatever they decide to do alongside Julian Blackmon of, oh, yeah, that's our bad. We totally missed that. Well, at some point when the misses keep happening and everybody else around you is telling you, hey, this needs to be addressed, at what point does it move from frustrating to borderline ignorant?
Yeah, it's certainly it doesn't inspire a lot of confidence right now at tight end, and I still am a little surprised that they're being this patient at the safety spot right now. Now, Nick Cross actually took some steps in this game that they liked. There were some things they didn't like as well, including his coverage on the touchdown, the Bo Nix touchdown pass, but down at the goal line. But the point is, yes, patience is good, but patience has to be used in the right way. For example, at wide receiver, they decided to be patient. Now, they did draft A.D. Mitchell, and I shouldn't act like they ignored wide receiver. They clearly did not, right? That's a second-round pick.
And they were right on downs last year. Right? I will give Ballard credit on that. I criticized that room. They were right on downs. He's looked like a great player.
But what I was going to say, though, even despite those moves, I mean, they were incredibly young. They didn't go out and get a veteran this offseason at all when, they could have done that and didn't really even entertain it from all indications. And certainly they looked at it in the draft, we think, just based on what we know now. It's been revealed they tried to trade up. But the point is, they wound up with a very young and unproven wide receiver room. Now, to this point in training camp, they actually have acquitted themselves very, very well. Like, they've had a strong camp. That gamble appears to be paying off, if you want to call it a gamble, right? But I think it was a projection. Let's put it that way. They projected those guys would take a step. So far, they are. And I think they're going to be proven right there, it looks like. Alec Pierce is I think, taking a step. Certainly, A.D. Mitchell's had a good camp. So that's paying off. They had the same outlook at tight end. They said, you know what? We like these guys. This guy's talented. That guy's talented. We think they can take another step. Well, the step ain't happening right now is the problem. So this is the problem with units that have a lot of unproven guys. You are left to make projections, and projections can go one of two ways. It's early, right? It's week 1 of the preseason. I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I'd like to see a lot more right now.
Stephen Holder is our guest. He is on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Stephen, give me a guy not named Jelani Woods, or not. Let's shift away from like tight end, but give me a player that seemed to be a certainty at the beginning of camp that you look at now and say, opportunity was there. They haven't really grasped it, and I'm wondering now if the opportunity is not starting to slide away.
It's the funny thing about their team is I kind of feel like we know who's going to be on this roster.
This is the definition of a run back, isn't it?
Yeah, it's. I'm not evading the question. I'm just thinking about it. Like, it's been really difficult, right, to determine who's even on the bubble because we kind of know. But I would say there's a couple guys. I think I don't know about getting cut necessarily, but early in training camp, Jalen Carles, the rookie linebacker, was all over the place and making a ton of plays. That has cooled for sure. And I thought he might be the third linebacker. I'm much, much less sure about that now. I don't think he's getting cut. I'm not saying that. That's not my projection whatsoever. All I'm saying is the role that I would have predicted for him after like 10 days of training camp, I feel a little differently about that now. He's kind of come back to the pack. But that tends to happen with rookies. They're not consistent, and I think that's just what you have to expect of young players, particularly when they're moving positions as he is. So I don't know, not the answer you're looking for maybe, but maybe a little insight into a young guy and how he's coming along.
Over under a number of players that will wear the Guardian cap once the regular season begins. And I don't mean that flippantly. I'm genuinely curious.
Yeah. No, I'm interested too. I mean, Jonathan Taylor, I don't know if anybody else wore one that I'm aware of on Sunday
I think I saw
Kylan Granson had one.
One
Rodney
of the tight
Thomas
ends for sure, right?
There you go. That's right. That's right. So anyway, I do think that some guys will wear them. They are. I'm not saying there was ever like a stigma because guys are so aware of head injuries today that I don't think we're going to make fun of guys. That would be ridiculous. I'm just saying there was probably a time when there was maybe a little bit of
hesitance. I mean, they're not sleek, right? I mean, honestly, let's just be real. They're not sleek. I'm a little amazed that they haven't come up with a way to kind of tie them down, so to speak, if that makes sense. But I would wear it. If I was a player, I'd wear it.
Right. They're not exactly. They're not sleek. They don't. They don't look the way you draw it up when you look in the mirror and fix your socks just right. And I mean, these guys pay a lot of attention to how they look.
Is that a barrier? Like, because I've seen that a couple places talking about how you can't get someone like Odell Beckham Jr. or like a Tyreek Hill, a flashy wide receiver, to wear it because it looks clunky. Like, is that, do you think, a real barrier in the PA?
No one said it to me. I just know players, okay? I know players. I'm doing this a long time. I'm telling you, they care a lot about how they look. I'm just telling you. And that's to be expected, right? I mean, they look at these college programs today. They have 17 alternate helmets. They wear a different uniform every other week, right? I mean, the look is important to these guys, and they're coming up through that system. Let me tell you, the biggest deal all year long is when they wear throwbacks or an alternate uniform. They can't wait to get those new helmets in the locker room. I've been in there when they bring them in, and these guys, I mean, it's like Christmas morning. They
Steven,
can't wait to put them on.
We just had this conversation yesterday, without question, and you are about to be judged. And I'm not talking about like the 1930s helmets that they wear, like the New York Titans, that kind of thing.
Right.
Of the legit like throwback uniforms, the two that are undoubtedly, and by throwback I mean uniform or helmets that were worn at some point like in our lifetime, okay?
Right.
The two clear-cut favorite, number one, numero uno, no question about it. There's a very clear number one on this. Is who?
Like someone who, a particular player's helmet?
No. The team, the helmet that is of the throwback helmets. The one that looks the best is what?
Well, I think you're going to say Seahawks.
Undoubtedly, there is no other conversation.
Way to play the man,
here,
Steve.
right?
Good job.
I love it. Yeah, I agree.
What would you have said for second place? Because it felt like you were uncertain for a second.
There is another one.
No. I remember us having that conversation. Is why I said that. But I don't know. Second place.
Dolphins.
I do like. Yeah, you know what? And granted, yes, I know I've said this a million times. I was a Dolphins fan growing up. That being said, I mean, amazing, right?
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, I that's a good call, actually. I like that.
I think the fact the little dolphin has on a helmet, and if you look closely, he's wearing a Guardian cap, which is also.
There was a fair amount of resistance when they changed that logo because, it's funny because Colts fans, or at least a lot of Colts fans, particularly young ones, they want them to evolve the uniform a little bit, right? And sort of the look. I hear that a lot. It's funny. I think the Dolphins fans kind of liked the traditional more, I think. That's the feedback I got from people I knew, and certainly was my opinion. I liked the traditional look. And maybe it's because I grew up with it, so maybe it depends on your age.
Of course, it's entirely what it is, right? I mean, let's be real for all of us.
Yeah. Right. So, but anyway, so I as for the Guardian cap, I think we're somewhat past the – it's ugly, right? Because they're wearing them every day in practice now. So, you're past that. You're accepted that you're going to wear it at least to some degree. I think when guys like Jonathan Taylor start wearing them, big name stars like that, I think that opens the door to more players doing it. So I don't know how many guys are going to do it, but I do think there will be an increasing number of guys wearing it. Particularly if they think it's bearing some results. I mean, I have no idea, but to my knowledge, now that I think about it, I'm not sure we've had a reported concussion so far in training camp. I could be wrong. Don't quote me. And maybe there's been one that slipped through the cracks. But that's interesting. That is interesting because they are hitting, to at least some degree. And so I don't know. Maybe that's relevant. I don't know. Maybe that's a result of that.
ESPN Stephen Holder joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Stephen, if we're going by trends, and admittedly it is a very small sample size because it's just year 2 for Shane Steichen, but if he goes off of last year's trend, that would indicate that joint practices are where we see the most meat and potatoes of Colts starters, and you don't really see any in-game number 2. Focusing on just Anthony Richardson for a second with that, he looked rusty, but it's hard to really analyze any true conclusions on him for just 2 series and 7 plays. Is that enough to motivate Steichen to give him a more extended run, or do you think he follows trends and game number 3 is the real dress rehearsal game where maybe you get a half or a quarter like you did last year?
Yeah, I would be surprised if Richardson plays much, if at all, against the Cardinals. That's just the reality. I don't think Steichen's going to be moved by his performance in week 1, where they didn't game plan for the defense. You know, they weren't preparing for the Denver Broncos. They were just running random plays. Hey, here's 10 plays that we'll never use again. Let's go run those.
Sure.
Right? I mean, that's literally what you're doing. So I don't think they see any connection to how you perform in that scenario versus what you'll do in weeks 1 and beyond. I'm not saying you should ignore it. I don't think you should. I do think he looks rusty. But I also think the circumstances are such that there may or may not even be carryover to the regular season. So anyway, the joint practices, they will go very hard for sure. They will take a lot of reps. It's going to be intense. You're going up against a defense you don't know. So that's a very good challenge and a needed challenge that you'll get. In fact, you're going to see more as a quarterback and an offensive player. You will see more tactics and more coverages in those joint practices than you will ever see in a preseason game. So it's actually a more realistic experience because they won't go put their good stuff on film in the actual game that everybody can watch, right? The other teams can watch the film of that game. They do everything though in practice because that is not shared. That film is not shared. So anyway, I expect that they will probably hold most of the starters out, and I think Shane Steichen will continue taking the approach he's taken throughout this training camp, generally speaking, which is a very conservative approach. He has been very, very conservative, despite his sort of, no holds barred, we're always competing and we're going for the jugular attitude, which still holds, by the way, in terms of how he's approached training camp. He's been very, very conservative. So I don't think he'll move off of that with game 2 of the preseason.
Stephen, lastly, 2 weeks from today is when the 53-man roster has to be finalized, if I'm not mistaken, the 27th. And pardon my naivete in asking this. So the first round, is there a deadline on the first wave of cuts on when they need to be, or is it now to the point where it's like 27th is the day and you can do it sporadically whenever? Take me through that.
They've changed this like 3 times.
I know.
I don't remember. So you've got to cut. Let me see here. You're cutting. I think they do all the cuts at the same time now, if I recall correctly. So there was, I think a couple years ago, they were cutting like 5 or 10 players the first or after the second game, I think. So now they're doing it, I believe, a couple days after the final preseason game, if I recall. So, or maybe the early. I can tell you right now, it's August 27th.
Yeah. So,
yeah, you did say that. That's why you said that. So anyway, it's going to be what they're doing is they'll play. Most teams will play, that Thursday or Friday, the prior Thursday or Friday, and then you get 3 or 4 days before you have to make your cuts. It used to be oftentimes when they had the 4 preseason games, you were playing on Thursday night and you were making cuts often, like, I don't know, was it sometimes like that Friday, that Saturday, actually. They were doing the cuts on Saturday, why, right? And also you had less time to kind of make those tough decisions and sort of mull those last minute difficult choices that you had to make. So I think teams like this a lot better. You'll still see players around the league start getting cut on the 23rd, 24th, 25th, like those first few days, particularly veterans that get cut. If you're going to cut a veteran, do them a solid, cut them early and let them catch on somewhere else before the deluge of hundreds of other players clog the market. So you'll see a lot of that, but the deadline's the 27th and it'll be one fell swoop for the most part.
And I realize that the reason you have yet to do the Derek Sluka feature is because you now know that's going to go beyond the 27th, right? You've got an open window on when you can get that done. We thought it was Slivka, but I believe it's Sluka.
Well, whatever his name is, I mean, he's clearly making the team, right? So, this poor guy.
I'm just telling you. The pride of Ithaca, Stephen. You got 2 weeks to probably cram that in. It might be better. It may behoove you to do that now.
Practice squad
to
guys still get throwback gear, Jake, so it's okay. There's still opportunities for it.
In all seriousness, every beat writer knows this. Like, there is sometimes like an undrafted player who's kind of got an interesting story. He may have overcome, some life-altering situation. You want to tell those stories, right? Or who knows, right? Maybe came up through a hard circumstance, whatever it is, right? So there's always a couple of those every year, and we talk among ourselves and like, I don't know if this guy's going to make the team. So the secret among us is, the dirty little secret is, you write those stories early. Okay, you write them early.
We're
because
waiting.
The guy's not going to be around. It's hate to say it, but it's just a reality.
We're waiting. Just saying. Pacer tickets on the line.
Mr. and Mrs. Sluka, that feature is coming any minute now.
All right, Stephen, we appreciate the conversation as always.
All right, guys. I'll talk to you soon.
Stephen Holder on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line. This is a good thing. This is a good thing. And I don't mean this. I'm probably shooting myself in the foot of the radio listener, but this is a good thing though. For all intent and purposes, it's been relatively a boring camp. There's not been a lot of injury. There's not been a lot of turmoil. There's not been a lot of holdout. There have not been many fights. It, for the most part, has been a pretty boring camp. That's a good thing, right?
Yes, boring, healthy, the whole nine. That's what I want out of a training camp. Nothing too flashy, nothing too newsbaity. Just get me to the week one.
I don't even know, and I'm embarrassed to admit that I don't even know this. I should, because it was just topical. Who was Hard Knocks this year?
The Bears.
Chicago Bears.
That's right.
Second episode drops tonight.
Do you watch it actively?
I watched
It drops.
the first episode, yes.
I almost
That was
watched.
the one where the big nugget about the Colts came out.
It got a couple other.
No, that was the in-season.
Yeah, that's the
Or the
Giants.
off-season.
They branched into so many
Gotcha,
different. It's turning into the Real Housewives, Jake. There's a spin-off of every
you're
type
right.
of angle. But
But it's actually entertaining.
But here's the thing. How, like, when Hard Knocks was about the Colts,
yeah,
and people like this, this is just awesome, whatever else. How many people, and I realize Eddie would represent what I'm talking about, but how many people outside the market of the team that is being discussed are actively watching?
I would assume the numbers have to be decent for them to continue to waste
Agreed,
budget funds
but it's not
to
like
do
it
it.
first was, right?
No, yeah, no. I would assume the fad of it has faded to some extent, but like I watched every bit of in season with the Miami Dolphins last year. I enjoyed, getting to learn about Mike McDaniel as a coach a little bit more. Though I believe the only issue I have with Hard Knocks now, and I could be wrong on this, but I think as it is continued to be a thorn in the side of teams wanting to participate, they've given teams more creative control over what is
Right.
actually released, which bumps me out a bit. I like the authentic aspect of older Hard Knocks where it felt like you were getting everything raw and, oh man, we shouldn't be seeing this. And now it's aggregated with control of the team.
It is still cool for really in anything, to see behind the scenes the way things work. It's reality TV is a fascinating dynamic. I mean, we sat last night and watched 90 minutes of Jail. You ever watch Jail?
Not watch Jail.
Eddie, you ever seen Jail?
No, I have not.
It's on the reels also.
Although if you keep hyping up me in this watermelon gummies thing, I may get there. I don't know.
I did get a TikTok clip from somebody upset about them trying to serve him tuna in prison, and he was allergic to tuna, and like the warden wouldn't. So maybe that was that show. I don't know. Perhaps.
Well, you know what? Actually, supposedly, and this is a horrific thought, right? I realize, and this is the only thing more. I'm not a huge fan of tuna. But you know what supposedly goes well with tuna, which is a totally horrific thought?
I said, hey, yo, I really, really love mayo.
No.
Hey,
Nice.
No, thank you.
Hey,
No, thank you.
yo.
That was an Eddie edit. It's a DJ Garrison
That's
track.
right. No thanks on that. But the funny thing about the show Jail, we were watching it last night.
Is that what it is though? Behind the scenes, like in a prison type deal?
It's just a reality show that features the jail, like in Las Vegas. There might be one like in Charlotte, maybe just the county jail.
Sure.
And it just shows them processing people that come in.
Okay.
70% of the people that come in are under the influence. You know, they're drunk, basically.
Sure.
Of the 70% that come in drunk, and obviously it's only the ones that they're going to put on TV that fit into this category. 90% of those are hostile. And then almost 100% the next day, once they sober up, are totally embarrassed and remorseful. And they're like, man, I am so sad. There was a guy last night that came in, and he was totally naked and had a net over his head because he's trying to spit on everybody. And he was totally naked, wanting to fight everybody. And then I couldn't believe it. Like the next day, you know, they go back and they're like, well, the next morning or whatever.
Sure.
Well, you know, Ted's had a chance now to dry out a little bit. We're going to go check on him. And, you know, they've now got him clothed. And he's like a totally normal, nice-looking guy that looks like he probably has a wife and kids. And he was totally mortified and was like, man, I have no idea what overcame me. I was at a party. You know.
Oh, if you're mortified then, just wait till August 12th, 2024 when Jay Query is seeing it in real time.
Wait till this bad boy's on TV, buddy, and then you're really going to be mortified, right? Really going to be mortified. Zack Kefer, by the way, coming up 2 o'clock. On this, the 41-year anniversary of the release of Fast Times, what scene this is from, right?
Correct.
When it comes to making out, Eddie, always play side 2 of Led Zeppelin 4, even though that's not from that album.
Yep.
Still don't know if Cameron Crowe intentionally did that or if it was supposed to show the incompetence of Mark Ratner. Did you know that the Las Vegas boxing commissioner in the 90s and 2000s, when heavyweight boxing was really a big thing, Tyson and Holyfield and all that, the name of the Las Vegas boxing commissioner, the one that suspended Tyson after the ear bite, was named Mark Ratner. Do you know that?
Did not know that.
No.
Educate and entertain.
That's what we try to do here. By the way, Eddie, we do have breaking news. This is from the world of IndyCar, announced for next season. AJ Foyt Racing will have David Malukas in their stable. Malukas currently driving, of course, for I always want to say Rahal Letterman Lanigan, but currently driving for Michael Shank Racing. Started the year with Arrow, had the wrist injury, now with Shank Racing, and next year will be with AJ Foyt. Somebody pointed out to me, and it is a very good point, with AJ Foyt having a technical alliance with Penske, Team Penske, makes you wonder if maybe he is not being held in the wings for a little bit until something might open up once you have attrition just through natural retirement of some of the drivers at Penske. But we shall see. But nonetheless, David Malukas, promising young American driver, will be driving next year for AJ Foyt Racing.
IndyCar back this weekend, right, Jake?
That is correct. Gateway, it is a Saturday race, just a 2-night show, Friday and Saturday. So practice qualifying Friday, and then the race on Saturday evening, and then turn around, drive right back, and be home Sunday in time to hang out and do whatever on Sunday. Now, Eddie, I believe that means that the race will be heard on our sister station, WIBC, because the Colts game will be on the Fan, correct?
You are correct.
Okay, so that's the way things
Look at you, Jake, knowing stuff what's going on.
Yeah, it's as if I work for both, right?
That's right.
I try. It is interesting, though, having been off the 3 weeks because of the Olympics, to get back into that swing. You just kind of, you over the course of that 3 weeks, you forget that we have 4 races left. I hate to say it that way because I enjoy it, but it takes a second to kind of get back into that flow, because then after that, I think it's Portland next weekend. So back-to-back. Busy time. We joked about it earlier, Jimmy, but frankly, and not to get too into the weeds on Major League Baseball, but it is interesting that, like, how in the world did the Yankees get shellacked by the White Sox like that? How does that happen, right?
I mean,
baseball.
Yes, that's baseball season indeed is the line that you dropped there. I don't really know where to pinpoint what has happened with the Yankees other than...
Well, they're only a half game back, right?
And I was talking with, I'll say our mutual friend, but I know you don't always claim him as, friend. He claims you as friend. One, Derek Schultz, but I was texting him about this last night. Exactly. He's that short fellow that always asks for validation on parking whenever he's in the building. And Eddie, I think, is begrudgingly nice enough to go ahead and give him that.
Yep.
I'll be brief on this because I realize the only reason we're talking about it is because the White Sox are a regional wrinkle here. The first 60 games of the season, the Yankees were 41-19, with their starting pitchers having an ERA of about 2.7. So pretty solid, all those categories, rather first or second in the majors. The last 60 games, they've been a below 500 ball club. Their starting staff has fallen apart. They're giving up 5 runs a game. Their overall ERA is 5. They haven't had enough offense outside of Juan Soto and Aaron Judge. Their bullpen has been just dreadful, and the starting staff, Luis Hill, gets rung up for 4 runs yesterday, and then the bullpen gets destroyed. The other element of it, Jake, which you said it kind of jokingly, baseball is a weird sport. Like, you have outcomes like this throughout the course of a season because it feels like one of those sports, much like, the NHL playoffs, where anything can happen. So I don't know where I don't know where to judge this necessarily, other than to tell you that
nice.
The White Sox, thank you, that was unintentional. The White Sox set records in pretty much every offensive category for this season against a team that is viewed as one of the best in baseball. But when we zoom out big picture, when we talk about the beer bet, like the Brewers and the Guardians and the Phillies, I think they're on, Eddie, correct me if I'm wrong on this because you're more the baseball aficionado than I. I thought I saw yesterday we were on pace to not have a 100-win team this year in baseball.
I think the Dodgers are very close, just based off of the remaining schedule.
Let's say, for the sake of argument, they don't get that.
The Dodgers and Cute Fella both are at 70 wins.
And so is New York. So the idea that it felt like a staple of MLB the last 5-7 years of having a 100-win team always in there, and it feels like you look around the entirety of Major League Baseball. Yes, there's some big names. Yes, 70 wins is impressive, but there's a lot of teams that kind of suck.
Yeah,
and
big vat of suck.
You're going to get a champion of the vat of suck, I think, this year. You'll still be a champion, though.
Yankees will probably win it. Actually, you know who will probably win it? You know who will probably win it?
Who's that? Cute Fella.
No.
Why not Cute Fella? They're young. They're hungry.
I like Cute Fella, but here's the thing. There's one franchise in baseball that wins it when you least expect it, and when you most expect it, doesn't win it. And you ever have that guy that there's always one guy that's just kind of hanging around, and it's like, yeah, you don't want that guy coming to the party because he has no boundaries. He'll hit on anybody's girlfriend. You just don't want him around. Just don't invite him.
Yeah.
Well, but he's put on some weight, and he doesn't have a great job right now. It doesn't matter. His attitude's still the same. You just don't want him around. When it comes to the baseball playoffs, the team that you're like, just keep them out. You don't want them around because when you barely crack the door open, they get their little foot in. They're like, hang on, and then you let them snake through the door. And then by the end of the party, you've got out the vacuum cleaner, you're vacuuming, they're still there. Like, what are you doing? Everybody else is left. Go home is correct. The St. Louis Cardinals.
The movie's over.
Nah.
Cardinals will probably win the World Series this year.
I don't see it.
It would be fitting. They would fit that mold. I see the outline you're putting out there. Yeah.
I mean, of all years, especially this one, right?
Yeah.
Some team like Baltimore, some team, Cleveland is a prime example for this. This happens every year in Major League Baseball. There's some team that's had a dream season, and you're like, oh, my gosh, it's just been great. They've exceeded expectation. They've played great all year. They got a great staff. Then they get into the opening round, and they completely flame out.
Yep.
This is the Oakland Athletics annual award.
Sure.
The Athletics
Twins.
Every year, the Twins are a great example
The Cincinnati
of this.
Reds during my lifetime.
You know what I mean? They get in, you get excited, you're like, this is awesome. And then they're just done before.
A week later, wait, what? The playoffs are over?
The Toronto Blue Jays have done this a lot, right?
Yes. Yeah.
The Cardinals are the antithesis of that.
Mariners
the Cardinals
have
are
done
the
it.
ones that you just let them around, and all of a sudden it's like, they're still here? Yeah. Well, there's no way they're going to win the World Series. Well, we're in Game 6 and they're up 3-1. They're up 3-2. Okay.
You might want to start accepting the parade route that's about to happen, right? Yeah.
I mean,
no, that's a good call. They're in a wild card spot as it stands, right?
Philly,
I know.
No, they're leading the NL Central. They're second.
No, they're second.
So they're a wild card team, though.
They are currently Arizona, Atlanta, St. Louis right now. They're 3 wild cards, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So right now it's Arizona, Atlanta, St. Louis would be the 3 wild card teams.
I still think it's Philly
that wins the World Series.
Yeah, this is what they do the last couple of years. They start out the season slow. They get hot sometime in June, July. They cool off, then they warm up right as the season's coming to an end. And next thing you know, they're one of the hardest teams to beat in the playoffs.
The Phillies are the New York Giants of Major League Baseball. They come through, just to your point, right? And they put together their feast or famine. And then the years that they're good. But yet, is anybody really a diehard fan? You're just kind of like, okay, they're kind of boring. Fine. I mean, Bryce Harper seems like a decent dude, and they got great players, but
they're starting to get healthy.
Does anybody know a Phillies? Is anybody like, oh, yeah, my buddy Ryan's a diehard Phillies fan? I got a buddy named Doug Weiler from Philadelphia, and he's a Phillies sports fan, and the Flyers are his team. The Phillies are like, yeah, okay. The Phillies won a World Series.
Jimmy and I know a Phillies fan.
Who?
Friend of the program, Tony East.
That is true.
Really?
Tony East is a Phillies fan, yeah.
The Phillies won a World Series where the game-winning run to clinch the World Series was scored by a guy from Indiana, and people around here didn't care. They're like, okay.
Might be a larger baseball problem than a Phillies problem, but
that's probably true.
Still. Yeah, I don't know.
How did Tony East become a Phillies fan?
Do you know the backstory on that?
You can ask him that
I like
question.
the fact that Eddie acted like I don't know Tony East. Jimmy and I know a Phillies fan. Who's that? Tony East? Oh, really? Can you introduce me sometime? I'd like to meet him.
Yep.
I've never talked to him before.
Weren't you just on his podcast like 2 weeks ago?
How did he become a Phillies fan? Do you know?
No.
I have a theory on baseball teams as to, I've shared it before, how people select their favorite team.
Is it not? I've always thought that if the parent is a diehard sports fan,
Number one.
gets passed down that way.
Okay. Typically it's dad, but family or like influential person's
brother,
favorite team, or sometimes rival of that.
Oh, my little nephew, the older nephew Declan is a Hoosiers fan through and through. The younger nephew Brody, that's about 8 and 4 respectively. He doesn't fully love sports, but he knows Declan doesn't like Purdue, so he roots for Purdue.
Correct. So that would be the second. The other two would be in terms of baseball. I think oftentimes, unless you're talking regional, which makes sense, but if it's somebody random, like you've got a buddy that you're like, who's your favorite team? Royals. Why are you a Royals fan? Another underrated aspect of this is that's the team I played for when I first played Little League Baseball, and they had the hats. And then the last one is, and this is the case, I have a couple of friends in this category, especially from my age group before you had, every team on television all the time. So you had Cubs and Braves fans because they were on TV all the time. But for a lot of people, so what's your favorite team? Blank. Why is that your favorite team? Because the first time that I remember watching a game, I liked their colors better than the other team. I know a buddy that's a Royals fan for that reason because of the 80 World Series. He's like, the Royals were the better, I remember the 79 series when it was the Orioles and the Pirates, the Bucks and the Birds, as we called it. And I kind of liked the Orioles because Pittsburgh had eliminated the Reds in the NLCS. So I rooted for the Orioles to eliminate the Pirates. And then that was the We Are Family Pirates, and they won it. So anyway, there's your lesson on Major League Baseball. And that was a lot of info on the New York Yankees, by the way. That's the most baseball we've done on this program since we started in a year, right?
I would agree with that, yeah.
Wouldn't you agree with that, Eddie?
I would agree with that sentiment outside of the betting stuff with Ohtani. Yeah.
Oh, I forgot
That's
about
true.
That. It kept us away, by the way, from talking about Will Levis and his horrific mayo scent. Eddie, this is from which scene?
I can't remember.
I
know the
pretty
song.
certain this is the first time they show them all, right?
Yeah. That sounds about, yeah.
Or is this actually when it shows them at school and you've got, like Arnold's got the gum in his locker. But I think it's when they are first showing them all. I mean, you're the assistant to the assistant manager at the movie theater. If this girl can't smell your qualifications. All the actions on the other side of the mall. I was thinking about this. Fast Times at Ridgemont High released 41 years ago today. I actually thought about this over the weekend. I have no idea what made me think of it. But one of the things that...
That is correct. It is the mall.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that kind of makes me sad for you guys, and that comes off the wrong way. That sounds condescending. It's not intended to. But it really is... A shame is the wrong word because whatever. I mean, it's not like it's some negative impact, but...
Are you saying this from the rocking chair of your front porch? Is this where I'm supposed to envision this happening?
It is hard to explain to you guys the social impact of the mall, of a mall in 1985. It was essentially the iPhone and video games all wrapped into one. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to explain it, but it was the
we've
epicenter.
seen enough representation from different shows that have gone back there. But additionally, we also grew up still as kids that, like, I know that we weren't quite as fully carefree, the world is our canvas as your generation because phones did arrive during our childhood,
Correct.
But we still had like, hey, you want to meet up at Greenwood Park Mall? Yeah, let's go do that. It'd be great.
Get that. I think the thing to me, and
their apex was the 80s for sure, right? Like that's not.
Oh yeah. And part of what, and again, I mean this is a sad commentary, unfortunately, but I sometimes think about this, and I've asked my mom. I'm like, am I hallucinating this? And my mom's like, no, I think that's actually pretty accurate. When I was in the probably fourth grade, fifth grade certainly. So when I was probably by the time I was 10 or 11, on a February day, I would call any of like three of my buddies. And we would arrange it, and our moms would pick us up and drop us off at Castleton Square Mall with like $5, enough to get a hot Sam pretzel and maybe a slice of Luca pizza if you wanted, and play a couple of video games. But literally, my mom would drop 3 or 4 of us off at the mall. I want to say I was 10. I mean, maybe it was more like I was 12. But either way, drop us off at the mall at noon, and then another one's mom would pick us up at, say, 4. And we would be unchaperoned by ourselves as 11 or 12-year-old kids for 4 hours at the mall. And I look at it now, and I'm like, that would be the lead story on the news today if someone did that. I mean, it's just the world has changed. I don't mean it as a knock on or whatever else, but
well,
it was
in part because it would be the youngest demographic inside that mall in the past 6 months.
No question. Well, even in the mall, right? I mean, it was just, but it was. I mean, there were so many. I can still recall at Castleton Square Mall the order of the stores. I mean, you had Spencer Gifts, and then right next to that was Merry Go Round, and that was across from County Seat, which had Harry Levinson next to it, and I mean, et cetera, et cetera. And like,
I remember thinking the Greenwood Park Mall was just this massive complex because you'd have arrows that say, "Hey, Ellis Ayers is that way," and there's Von Mar back there, and there's Fanatics.
There was the middle area, and then it all kinds of spawns off of that, right?
We'll get a pretzel
Park Mall.
at Annie Ann's, be a good time.
Washington Square was the same way, and then you had Washington Square was for the East Side kids, Lafayette Square for the West Side, Greenwood for South Side, and Castleton for North Side. I mean, it was. And then Glendale, you had the Brass Flamingos, and it was just all different. But I think that one of the things that is so fun for people retro actively with Fast Times is it does allow you to just remember the simplicity, if you will, of that time. It just was a different era. I'm not saying better, worse, whatever else, but it was totally different. And I know that sounds foreign, but people listening that are my age are like, oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Totally remember.
I mean, probably most iconic series that has come out in mine and Eddie's lifetime where they emphasize a clear mall scene would be in Stranger Things.
I was going to
because
say,
that's set in the 80s, and they talk about,
right?
let's go.
Well, that movie, Jimmy, is essentially my buddies, right? Because doesn't Stranger Things start in like 83?
Yeah.
And they're like 10 years old?
Yeah, final season, I think, coming out next year for those that are into that kind of thing.
In Indiana, right?
Yes. Yep.
I mean, it was a fun time for certain. It was definitely a fun time. But I get it. Everything, Father Time's undefeated. But, boy, I miss two things sometimes. I just think to myself, if I could snap my fingers and go back, and yes, I promise I'll quit reminiscing and we'll catch up with Zack Kefer here in a second. But if I could go back right now and just get a hot Sam pizza pretzel on the stick, which literally it was just a pretzel dipped in tomato sauce and Parmesan on it. Can't be that hard to make it myself, but it was so good. And then the other one is if I could go back right now and just airdrop myself right next to, just to the east of where the Apple store is, if I could go right now and go back to Dalt's and get some seasoned fries and a bottle of grape soda, man, life is good. We don't even have to go to Farrell's. Just hit me at Dalt's. Dalt's was so good.
Eddie's not a big Farrell's fan, so he's happy that you're skipping that one.
Have you been to Farrell's?
Sorry, I was just...
Where?
No, he's not. I'm sorry, I was
going to say.
I thought it was obvious that he wouldn't have been because it would have dated him.
Well, there are a couple of them still left. That's why I was
Really?
like, wait, what?
Okay.
Farrell's was great, but a birthday party at Farrell's, and they bring out the big drum. Now you got me talking. Zack Kefer, by the way, going to join us next.
Oh, I know this song.
It's the last big fiesta of the year, right?
Yeah. Jimmy, do you feel left out?
This is where Vargas brought his wife over. And
I'm having a great time.
Arnold enjoyed meeting Vargas's wife, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Joining
That's
us
a
now
heart.
on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line, and I'm sure completely confused as to why he is. Zack Kefer is, of course, with The Athletic. He is their feature writer predominantly in covering the National Football League, goes around and covers a lot of different angles and stories with that. Zack, I'm going to get right to this point, which I kind of talked to you about this last time we talked, but that is that now that you have gone around and you have done features on, players like Tua or different organizations besides the Colts, after having your roots in terms of a writer standpoint with the National Football League about the Colts, have you found that there's a common thread the way most of these teams are built and operate, or is it really completely different from one franchise to the next in terms of their operations this time of year?
Yeah, Jake, I think it's the latter. I think I've been pretty surprised at how differently teams do it. I mean, certainly training camps can feel redundant, right? I've been on the road for, like 9 days, and I just got back this weekend, and I bounced around to, I think, 4 different camps, and each of them has a different feel. I'll start here with the biggest circus of all, and that was Dallas, right? So we're in Oxnard, California. They're not in Dallas. And it feels like a state fair in a way because, yeah, there's football happening, but there's like a flea market of all these shops of Dallas Cowboys gear. And I get that, right? They're making money, and all these fans that probably don't get to go to games as much as they'd like or watching practice, but they're living and dying on every snap during training camp. And they're, 1,000 miles from where the Cowboys play their home games. And after the practice, all the players meet with their families on the field. Jerry Jones is doing interviews like every other day, and it just feels like you're in a circus. And then the next day, a completely different world. I'm in Thousand Oaks, California, watching the Rams practice, and it's closed, and there's nobody's there, and it's simply just football. And you can hear Sean McVay installing the offense and screaming, and he's 50, 60 yards away, and I can hear everything he's saying. Now at Dallas the day before, when the Rams were practicing against the Cowboys, it was a circus. That's the only word that came to mind. It was just wild to me to see how different it is. And you think about what the Colts are doing in Westfield, and I was in a high school field last week in Ohio where the Houston Texans were practicing. So I've seen a lot of different over the last couple of weeks and then comparing it to the Colts. And it's not that surprising to see why some teams have a lot of distractions, like the Cowboys, and some teams don't, like the Rams.
Zach, this year, Zack Kefer is our guest. Maybe I say this every year and I forget about it until the next year, but we were out at Colts camp last week. Good to be out there, and I was watching practice, and I know that every practice is different, but it was primarily a walkthrough. I'm still old enough to remember the days of, 2-a-days or 2-hour practices and a lot of hitting.
Yeah.
The Colts have really scaled that back. I think a lot of it is focused on once they get back to West 56. But, again, does that seem to be the norm from what you've seen, or is that more injury-related and prevention, or is this just philosophical differences of Shane Steichen, et cetera?
Yeah, I thought a lot about this. It's really tough. I've talked to a lot of coaches about it too because, Rick Vittori has been on this station a lot, and he makes a really good point. He says these guys got to play football. Like, you cannot just go through the motions for a month at 20 miles an hour, so to speak, and then just play like 70 snaps on September 10th all out. Like, that's where guys get these soft tissue injuries. We've seen that. Go back a couple years. Marlon Mack was coming off a great season in 2018, pulled his hammy in the first game against Jacksonville, and his career was never the same. He didn't get paid. It was a career year for his contract. So you see that a lot where these guys ramp it up so much, and they're just not ready. And some teams get away with it and some teams don't. The one thing I learned from covering camp every day with the Colts when I did, and then watching the preseason games and then the regular season games, is how little you can actually learn from training camp. Yeah, there's a little bit. You can see a little bit with the skill positions, the receivers, the corners, and obviously the quarterbacks, but the real football does not happen until September. And there's a lot of misleading stuff this time of year. Fans overreacting, reporters overreacting. I'm raising my hand right now. I was guilty as well, to not real football. I remember in 2021 and 2022 asking Frank Reich about his offensive line. I was like, Frank, I just watched the Lions defensive line whoop your guys. Are you concerned? And he's like, no, I feel good about our group. And what happened? Matt Ryan was really bad that year, but the Colts offensive line was a disaster the first 3 months of the season, and it didn't really get much better. So it's hard to really realize what you're seeing and how much of it is real this time of year. I would caution on that front, especially the real football. But look, the Rams, they were the first team. I was just out there talking to Sean McVay, they don't play anybody in the preseason. They were the first team to really do that. Most of the leagues followed that script. I'm of the other side, right? These guys need to play. If you're the Bears right now, you need to have Caleb Williams out there playing 2 drives or whatever. I think the Colts need to play Anthony Richardson, so he's a little bit more acclimated to what a game feels like when he starts the opener in about a month. And it just feels like, for me, he didn't get enough on Sunday. And, yeah, you're going to have some cobwebs. You're going to have some rust. He didn't play great. I'm not super concerned about it. But these guys need to play at full speed, more than 10 to 15 snaps when they're going to jump up to 70 when it really counts.
National NFL writer for The Athletic, Zack Kefer, is our guest. He joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Zach, in your tour around training camps, has the consensus and the vibe that you've gotten, whether it's from talking with coaching staffs or whether it's just from your observations, been that in today's NFL, to your point about guys being held out of preseason games or the value of it clearly dropping year over year, has the consensus been around your camp tours that joint practices are the real valuable commodity for these coaching staffs and preseasons are really an archaic being that, likely is going to continue to dwindle year over year?
You nailed it, Jimmy. That's exactly it. I've talked to a lot of coaches who will say the joint practices are way more valuable than the preseason games. And the reason is they can control it, right? The quarterback's not going to be taking hits. You can just remove that chance for error, that chance for injury so much in a joint practice. And look, these guys get tired of hitting each other. I'm sure you've heard that from Colts players this week and when you guys were at camp last week. They get tired of hitting each other. And when they get to see a different colored jersey and go against a different guy, it's really valuable work. And they can try different things. And the other thing is these offensive staffs, they can try stuff and not be afraid to fail, right? They can try different schemes and different sets and different packages that might not work. And it's okay to do that in training camp. And it's okay a little bit in the preseason. You're not going to show a whole lot. But I think they're more experimental in the preseason, and they're willing to try more stuff on the practice field than they are on the game field. So any coach around the league is going to tell you, look, we absolutely get way more from a joint practice than we will a preseason game. And that's just the reality. And look, I was talking to a coach last week, and he's got a young quarterback who needs to get some reps. But he's like, I'm just not going to play him in the preseason because coaches are protecting themselves by not playing these guys in the preseason, right? So if that quarterback goes down, that coach all of a sudden faces a much tougher job this season. And if he's on the hot seat, that makes it a lot tougher. And that's how coaches lose jobs over time. So the reality is they're protecting the player, but they're also protecting themselves to some degree.
In that same vein, to your earlier point, because I'm with you, and this is the I don't want to say old school, but it's the older way of thinking about what's most important for development of a player. We'll use quarterback since that's always the hot button topic. If you're not getting preseason reps, are you robbing yourself and your body's ability to acclimate to the hard-hitting, full-speed nature of week 1, of week 4, of week 12? Are joint practices adequate enough? If we get to a point, which I think we will, where there's maybe one preseason game, or maybe just drop to 2 and stops there, but 3 joint practices or 2 joint practices, is that level of real-world experience valuable enough to still have their bodies ready to go for the regular season, or are we in danger of entering a point where guys aren't going to be conditioned the way that they should for real speed because you're taking away preseason games?
I think we're heading there. I think what you just mentioned is sort of what the future looks like in 5 years. Now, some teams are already doing it, right? They heavily favor the joint practices, and you can just tell that they put so much more emphasis on the joint practices. Let's say they stack 2 or 3. I think the Rams are doing 4 this year. And the Rams aren't doing anything in the preseason. Like, they're playing nobody that's a starter or even close to a start in the preseason. So that tells you where the value is for that franchise. And, the Cardinals are coming in this week, right, to Indy, right? They're going to practice against the Colts. Watch Marvin Harrison Jr. against the Colts secondary, because that's going to be the realest test this secondary, these starters really face in the preseason. And that's going to tell you, as much as anything, what they're going to look like come September and October and December. I do worry about, the stamina. They're going to push these guys in training camp, and they're going to get them physically ready, but they're certainly backing off, as Jake mentioned a minute ago. I would always enjoy talking to Adam Vinatieri when I covered the Colts, because he was old enough to remember the two-a-days. And he was old enough to remember, like, Bill Parcells yelling at him saying, if you don't make this kick from 50 yards, everybody on the team is doing gas serves for an hour. That's just not what's done anymore, not even close to that. So it certainly is a different era. They're getting smarter at how they protect these guys. And look, they're under a lot of pressure from the NFLPA too, right? Like, the NFLPA is fighting for less practice time and less stress on these bodies so they can protect those bodies so those players can perform well and get their contracts. So I see both sides of it. But the reality is it's very interesting to see how these teams approach it, what they value. It's joint practices over the preseason games. But you're not going to see a ton of great football in September. We'll see some for sure. But if you remember the last couple of years, there have been some duds the first couple of weeks of the season because these guys just aren't ready to play football. And I've heard it once. I've heard it 1,000 times from players over the years. The only way to really get better at football is to play actual football. Like walkthroughs, practices, installs, all that's great and all that helps. But it ain't football. And so nothing really readies them for the season until they get out there and they play the week one game.
Zach, several people pointed this out to me. Zack Kefer is our guest from The Athletic. He's on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line. When it comes to the preseason, and I have always found this interesting, players devalue it. To an extent, the teams devalue it. The owners don't because they still charge the same price, and it's part of your season ticket plan. Something there is going to have to give, right?
Man, that's trash. I agree with you. I agree with the fans completely. I mean, back in the day, Peyton and these starters would come out. They'd roll the ball out. They'd drive down the field, score a touchdown, and they'd take the rest of the night off, right? And you're going to charge fans $200, $250, a regular season price to watch the backups, the 2s and the 3s, and even the 4s play. I think that's trash. I think it's always been trash. But you tell the NFL owners, Jake, to take less money because that's not a group that takes less money.
Yeah, there's a reason that 90% of them got franchises, based on a different business venture that made them that kind of money into the first place, right? I mean, there's no doubt about that. Zack Kefer, our guest. Zach, as you've walked around the league, and you've got a pretty good finger on the pulse around the league beyond just the scope of West 56 because you've branched out now. If both were available right now, which one is on the free agency wire the shorter amount of time? Chris Ballard as an executive or Shane Steichen as a coach?
I think Steichen. I don't think Steichen's out of a job for more than an hour. And maybe I'm exaggerating, but talking to a lot of people around the league the last couple of weeks, just, I'm writing about quarterbacks and I'm writing about coaches. And the vibe I get around Shane Steichen is he is just really, really sharp. A lot of people were really, really impressed what he did last year. I mean, you guys have talked about it ad nauseum, but again, the franchise quarterback was on the field 3 games, 4 games, whatever you want to call it, however you combine the minutes. And he had Gardner Minshew for most of the season, who was limited, and they were a 4th and 1, whatever it was, catch away from winning the division for the first time in 10 years and making the playoffs. So they won a lot of games that a lot of people thought they had no business winning. The game in Baltimore comes to mind. Really impressive job by Shane Steichen. I think Chris Ballard is still really respected around the league. But look, and I've talked to John about this in the afternoon show, like the numbers need to show up at some point. This division drought needs to show up. And I think it's one thing to be a good scout and to add talent to the team. And I think Ballard's proven his chops in that regard. He's done a pretty good job of building up the roster. But the other element is finding ways to take this team to the next level. And it just seems like it's just stagnant for the last several years. And we can go on and on about the quarterback carousel they went through when I was covering the team, from Carson Wentz to Matt Ryan and all the other names I'm forgetting. But the reality is they need to win this division. Like, that is so important to Jim Irsay. He's tired of finishing in 2nd and 3rd in the AFC South. And I was just with the Texans last week, and that's a team that certainly has sights on not only winning the division, but maybe making a run to New Orleans in the Super Bowl.
The AFC South team, Zack Kefer, in your opinion, that has the highest likelihood of looking the least compared to a year ago of what they looked like, be it better or worse, the one that is going to be the most different than what they were a year ago is which?
I'm going to go Tennessee because I think Callahan's going to change everything that they do. It's not just Derrick Henry being out of there. I'm not a big believer in Will Levis. I remember really studying him during the draft process. The Colts were interested in him. I'm just not sure if he's going to take that next step, and I don't know what they look like if he doesn't. Like, what are they going to hang their hat on? They've got some good receiving talent, for sure. They made the trade. They've still got Hopkins, but I just don't know what they look like. I think the Texans are going to have a little bit harder time with the targets on their back. It's a little bit different when you're coming up and you're being overlooked and no one really thinks you're going to be a team. And then you are a team and you win really quickly and you surprise the people. That's fun. Now they need to back it up, so that's going to be a challenge. To answer your question, I think it's the Titans. But I think the Texans are in a new world right now. And as the Colts have learned, especially going back to even Andrew Luck's second year when they won really fast his first year. Now everybody is gunning for him.
Right.
I think that's a little bit of a challenge, and I think the Texans are going to live through that a little bit this year. They went out, they added some pieces, they've got their quarterback on a rookie deal, but now they got, a bunch of primetime games after having none last year. It's a different world when you're suddenly the team that people are chasing.
Zach, we don't often go national, so since we have you, there's something I wanted to ask you about, kind of big picture around the National Football League. Zack Kefer is our guest, national writer for The Athletic, on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. In terms of big swings or power players around the National Football League, it's been the rumor mill out in San Francisco surrounding Brandon Ayuk that has continued to be the top story this offseason. I'm sure you saw this about an hour or so ago, but Ian Rappaport reported something that I had seen a local Pittsburgh talk host have a couple of weeks ago, basically this standing pat belief that Ayuk was coming to Pittsburgh. Rappaport says the Steelers and 49ers have a deal on a potential trade in place. All San Francisco has to do is give the final sign-off, but they also acknowledge in that same post that the 49ers have offered Ayuk a long-term deal to stay, which he has not at this point accepted. What happens with the 49ers as the perceived be-all, end-all contender of the NFC teams if they wind up sending Ayuk to Pittsburgh?
I think it's a loss. I don't think it's a catastrophic loss. He's a very good player, but if you're a defensive coordinator and you're preparing for the 49ers, I still think Ayuk is fourth on the list, right? I think it's McCaffrey who's the best offensive player in football that's not a quarterback. It's not Mahomes. I think Debo is a problem, and I think Kittle is a problem, and I think Ayuk is fourth, and I think the San Francisco 49ers could and will survive this. Ayuk's a really good player, but they've been through this before, right? They've lost pieces, and they just keep coming. I still think they're the best team in the NFC. The NFC is weaker than the AFC, and I still think they could get to the Super Bowl even with Ayuk.
Does it move the needle at all for Pittsburgh? Zach, I'm sorry to cut across you, but I kind of view Pittsburgh as an also-ran. It's going to be Cincinnati and Baltimore vying for that top spot. Does him coming into that quarterback battle going on in Pittsburgh with him being the weapon of choice there now, would that do anything if this move happens?
Yeah, I was getting to that, and I think that is what my takeaway would be. Is it really does move the needle in Pittsburgh, but the question is who's calling the plays there? It's Arthur Smith. How much faith do you have in that? I mean, they were loaded in offensive talent last year in Atlanta, and they just couldn't get anything moving consistently. So I have some concerns. They don't even have their quarterback number one on the field right now. Justin Fields has done well in camp, didn't look good in the preseason game. I don't think it changes a whole lot in reality for Pittsburgh. It might change a whole lot in terms of expectation and hype, which is what we're all hearing this time of year around the entire league. Everything's going great, right? Wait till September comes, and we'll see how everything's going. But I think it's a splashy move for the Steelers. They need some juice on offense. But I don't know who their quarterback is, and I don't love their play caller, and I don't think it changes a whole lot in the AFC North, which is the best division in football.
Zach, every year there's a team. Last year it was the Houston Texans. Every year there's a team that, like by November, you're going, wait, are they actually good? They haven't faded yet. And then before you know it, boom, they are indeed good. Maybe it's schedule, right? Maybe schedule helps. Give me this year's team that's going to be the case, where all of a sudden we're going to be sitting there once we're zipping up and it's getting cold outside and we go, man, they're still there.
I think the Seattle Seahawks could be that team. I think McDonald's really sharp. I think they got a lot of talent. It wasn't really a rebuild. I think they could be the team, but that's a good question, Jake. I hesitate to say the Chicago Bears. They have so many pieces in place, but it's the Bears, and they find a way to screw these things up so often. But I do think the Bears are going to be better, and I think it's going to be an up-and-down season, as it is usually for rookies. But I think the Bears are going to walk out of the season thinking, okay, the arrow's finally pointing up. But I think Seahawks, I like what they're doing in Seattle.
I'll go with Seattle's a good one, man, because Seattle never totally bottoms out, right? I mean,
Exactly.
You know what?
That's a division that's, gettable, so to a degree.
I'll go with the one that we're going to see this weekend here. I'll go with Arizona. Jimmy, thoughts?
Oh, I'll go with the Chargers. I realize they're going to be a popular pick to take.
Annual year, man. Every year, right?
But they're the annual favorite out of the AFC West. I like the idea of Justin Herbert finally having a competent head coach there in Harbaugh.
Who's he throwing to?
Yeah, Mike Williams is gone, right?
I mean,
when he was healthy, he was a big target.
In my defensive scenario, I would have taken the other two teams, but in the interest of radio as well, Zach, Jake always likes to remind me the show ends at 3. Rather than hitch my wagon to Harbaugh and Herbert than to nobody.
Yeah, no,
I'm also not taking the Raiders for those same issues, right? I mean, mainly just the quarterback room, but I don't buy.
No, they have the worst roster in the league.
Yeah.
Right.
Zach, what do you got that you're working on currently?
Dave Canales, he's the new coach in Carolina. Went through some pretty heavy personal stuff. Tony Dungy was a mentor. His coaching rise is very unique. Had a really good sit down with him a couple of weeks ago. Then the Texans, who are really the team the Colts are chasing. And I think that game, that opener, I think it's really, really big for the Colts. It feels like it. People are talking about it already. I don't think it's as big for the Texans. I think they have bigger things in store for the season. And then I have a profile of Troy Aikman. Spent some time with him this summer about where he's at in his career and where he's going next.
He kind of seems like he'd be a good dude.
We had a great time. It was such a fun. It was like a 2-hour breakfast one day, and there was a little bit of Cowboys, Jimmy Johnson stories, but also he started his own beer in Dallas, and like that was really fascinating to learn about, like how you start your own beer. How
did you have the beer?
It.
Did you try the beer?
I did. I had to do my research, right?
So this is like what? It's a beer that is of the mold of what in terms of like, is it super hoppy? Is it an IPA? Is it like what kind of beer are we talking?
Yeah, so Aikman is super, super into like active lifestyle. He's in incredible shape. He's into biohacking. He works out every day. He walks in slow sunlight. So the beer, to answer your question, is it's like a challenger to Mick Ultra. It's super healthy for you. There's no fillers. There's no sugars. There's no added sweeteners. So it's like the healthy, active lifestyle beer.
Okay. Now, did you see, because Zach, before we let you go, I need you to side with me on this. This ridiculous Will Levis mayo cologne is fake, right? This is a publicity stunt. It's not a real thing, correct?
I almost puked watching it. Like, I hate mayo. So, like, just the thought of mayo, like, just watching him.
You have never said anything in your life more accurate than that. It is the most horrific substance ever known to man, right?
I hate it. I tell my wife, don't even buy it. Don't keep it in the house. I don't want to be around it. My kids will never have it. I'm anti-Will Levis because of the mayo thing as much as his quarterback play.
So here's the thing. Zach lives relatively close to me. I'm glad that you don't let your wife have it in your house because that's even still close. That's too close for mine, right? That's
we're getting it out of Meridian Kessler, man. One house at a time. We're getting rid of it.
I love it. Zach, appreciate it. We will be reading your stuff at The Athletic.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
All right, Zack Kefer on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line. I'm telling you.
I don't like how you framed that. It sounds like I'm team mayo cologne. I'm on your side with the cologne, but
again,
if
you're just joining us on the program,
condiment.
Where have you been?
Thank you, Eddie. This is what was released earlier today from Will Levis and his cologne Will Levis 8 in partnership with Hellman's. This has to be fake. Here we go.
Luscious. Eggy. Smell like greatness. Will Levis, number 8, Parfum de Mayonnaise.
That's fake.
If you're
that's totally The Onion in video form.
If you're a Titans fan that somehow has your radio broken and are a part of the company, and you happen to purchase this today, and it's a real thing.
No one purchased it.
I know, but if they did, we would need a receipt to validate it, right? Give me a purchase order.
There's no way. Anybody that tried to buy it was like, oh, look, they already sold out because they never sold any. Tomorrow or like next week, they're going to come out and say this was all
in a world where I want to believe that journalism is still alive and well. One of the local papers in Nashville had mentioned that within 90 minutes, fans saw that it sold out. So
yeah. Exactly, right? It ain't real. It's kind of like this. When I was in high school, I'm not going to say any names because I don't want to incriminate anybody in case the statute of limitations are up, but he had 2 first names.
Is he in your closet?
No. That if you're just joining the program, that sounds weird. Not that good. Nice dude. Played football at North Central, but not good enough friends with me that he signed the closet in my bedroom. That also sounds weird. But there was a guy that would run the NCAA tournament pool every year, okay? Like, he ran the bracket.
Sure.
It was the master bracket of North Central High School from 1988 to like 1990. This guy was the guy everybody knew. It was $2, and you enter the bracket, and he did it. And then after about 3 years, people figured out, they're like, wait a minute, because everybody would say, hey, Ryan, who won your pool? It's a guy in my study hall. Okay. And then people in the study hall like, wait a minute, I'm in your study hall. No, different study hall. So people figured it out after 3 years, and then by then we moved on from high school, whatever else. But it was all a hoax. It was all a scam, and he was pocketing all the money. Good for him, right? And actually, he dated a girl that ended up in Playboy, so good for him twice. But this is that, right?
More than twice.
Everybody, I'm telling you, everybody that thinks that they're ordering something and getting it, it's all a hoax. They're being redirected. The whole thing's a scam. There's no way this is real.
Tweet at Jake Query if you actually purchased it and have a purchase order.
There's no way. Look, if somebody actually bought it, send it here and I'll wear it. I'll wear it. And I hate mayonnaise.
It's getting light at 10 a.m.
I hate mayonnaise. I'm telling you, it's the most disgusting thing on the planet, and I'll probably puke. But I am that confident this is fake.
There's
this
a lose-lose for all of us with that, because if it's real, then you wear it, but then you wearing it makes the room smell like that, and then the chance of it inducing vomit, then we have to see you throw up. I don't want any of that.
No chance. Jake, please let Eddie know that we need context when it talks about guys in your closet. Yes, I would agree. My childhood bedroom, the closet, the wall inside the closet is when I was a kid, where all of my buddies would write and sign. We practiced our autographs and wrote down like girls we had crushes on, etc. And it's still there. My parents were going to move when we were going to try to save the wall, but my parents are not moving.
When was the last entry into that wall?
Excellent question. I recently discovered that in 1993, one of the girls that I grew up with, who was over a lot, signed it and put that her crush was me. And I went to her and was like, wait a minute, what? I didn't know this. And she said, yeah, I told. And she said, I told Brad Washburn. So I went to Brad Washburn. I'm like, dude, you did not tell me this? And he goes, well, I told her I wouldn't tell anybody. Guy code 101.
Come on now.
I mean, come on, right? But everything ended up okay. When we come back, very cool thing taking place 1 week from tonight in Indianapolis, and it's a message I think is very important, and it involves a friend of mine. He'll join us to discuss next. 41 years ago today, Fast Times at Ridgemont High was released.
Tackled by Jefferson.
This is the Ridgemont Lincoln High School football game that if you truly look at the end, they actually just played a half. But Cameron Crowe's great Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Crushed by Jefferson.
41 years ago today. Joining us now on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line, speaking of films, there's going to be one shown at Clues Hall 1 week from tonight, and it's all been put together by a friend of mine who I had the pleasure of meeting through our mutual friend Dan Wakefield. I have mentioned on the air the fact that Dan Wakefield, I went on 2 different occasions for a film that is in the works still about Dan Wakefield, where we went back to Sumner, Mississippi, where Dan Wakefield had covered the Emmett Till trial. We also went to New York City to go back and see some of the spots where he hung out with a lot of literary writers in the 50s primarily. The guy that was putting that film together just completed probably his signature project, and including a second version of it, Beyond the Bridge, A Solution to Homelessness. And this has all been put together by a Bigger Vision Films, and Don Sawyer joins me now, who has put all of it together, the filmmaker. Don, how are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you, Jake, for having me on.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. Let's begin with this. Beyond the Bridge is one that was a film that you had put out that focused on, and you correct me if I'm misstating this, but obviously I'm familiar with the work.
Mm-hmm.
You essentially did I'll call it a documentary about the homelessness in Indianapolis, and that expanded to beyond even that in talking about going to different cities where they have had positive work towards trying to limit or end homelessness. Milwaukee is one of those cities in which you have gone and you have seen an effective strategy that they've had. And your latest film kind of tackles exactly some of those strategies. Is that a fair way of saying what we're looking at here?
Yeah, that's right. Under the Bridge, this was a film here that we did about the closing of the Davidson Street homeless camp. If anybody's interested in seeing it, it's on Amazon Prime, Apple TV, etc. But people just kept telling us, Jake, that, thanks for telling us the problem. What's the solution? So we drove over 40,000 miles on our car, coast to coast, visiting 12 cities, looking at their homeless response systems, just to find the solution that could be transferred from every community. And we did find it, and so we made the film, and we're going to be showing it at Clues Hall on Tuesday.
So Tuesday at Clues Hall is when this is going to be shown, and we'll get the information for everybody as to how they can come out and see it, the importance of being able to see it. Don Sawyer, my guest, and he is with the Bigger Vision Films. Don, to me, when it comes to trying to help the problem of homelessness and be aware of it, I think the first thing that is so important, and you feel free to disagree or expand either way on this, I think there needs to be a compassion and an understanding, because I think so many of us just think, well, people that are homeless, they just decided to do that because they like to drink all the time. And when you really get into it, you realize that there are so many other factors that go into it. And the first step in helping out those factors is simply being aware of it to begin with. And I think your film was so critical in that. What did you learn through the process of these films?
Well, I thought the same way before I started. I used to live in L.A. I've been in Indianapolis for years now. But I used to go to Skid Row, and I just pass out food and clothes. I thought, well, you're just drunk and you're just mentally ill and whatever. But when I came here and I started doing these films, I realized it is a systemic breakdown in the help industry that's supposed to be helping these folks. It is, the first thing that struck me is it's not really their fault. Everybody makes bad mistakes. When I make a mistake, I don't lose my housing. A lot of these people, they've gone through the foster care system, or they have something unfortunate, catastrophic health industry. It's just, there's all kinds of ways that people become homeless, and it's not just, people in their fault and all of that. That's the first thing that I really learned. And then when you start looking at it, you see, well, this is really just a systemic breakdown of people who are supposed to be helping this situation. And then you realize this system can be fixed easily, and these folks can be helped easily. And the ones that actually don't want any help, well, then they will be separated out from the rest of them. I found, you're very right. Compassion is important, but some people don't get there. Go with the economics. It costs $30,000 to $50,000 every homeless person that you see on the street. It costs the taxpayer $30,000 to $50,000 because the emergency room is their primary care. They get arrested for vagrancy or whatever. It costs more. The cost of doing nothing is what they call it. If you give them housing and you bring them services, it's a third of the cost to actually help people. So if you can't get to the compassion part, you can get to the economic part. It's a win for everybody to deal with it. We show in our film that we're going to be showing on Tuesday the solution that is very doable for any community. And this one, Mayor Hogsett will be there giving remarks. And there will be outside experts, Jim Maffey from Milwaukee, who presides over the best homeless response system in the country. They have the lowest rates per capita. He'll be there. Sam Simbaris, who is Time Magazine's 100 most influential people for this year, he'll be there. It's a town hall meeting, and for your listeners and for all of us who are sports fans, we go down to see the Colts or the Pacers, or we go down for a meal or something. We see this. It's unpleasant. There's a way to deal with it that's not just kicking them around the street. And we really invite you to come down and check out the film and everything that's going on.
4:30 a week from today at Clues Hall, 4:30 Eastern. And again, there's going to be the speakers there, as Don had mentioned, the comments made, and then the film itself, Beyond the Bridge, A Solution to Homelessness. Don, you had mentioned Milwaukee has been effective. Indianapolis, if I'm not mistaken, is the largest metropolitan area in the United States without a municipally run shelter for the homeless, meaning one that is not like theologically based, for example. I guess the first thought would simply be, well, just build a big shelter and everybody then can go live in it. I mean, there's more to it than goes into it than just that. That is discussed in the film itself. In terms of how people can be to get to Clues Hall 4:30 on a week from today, Don, is this a ticketed event? Is this a free event? And if it is, how do people make sure that they can secure the spot to see it?
It's free, and the doors open at 3. If you want to come and hang out, there'll be concessions and even alcohol. It's like any other. Clues Hall is beautiful. I mean, if you haven't been there, I'd go just to be in the hall. Their front is great to just hang out. They have a parking garage right next to it. It's very convenient, but it is free. Price is right.
So the doors open at 3 o'clock. The viewing begins at 4:30, and this is. And listen, I want people to know and understand, because I've been with Don on his projects, and I know the work that he puts in. I know the compassion with which he has for the subjects. I know the passion he has for the work and the responsibility. He and his partner, Tim, that put this all together, his work partner, Tim, that film and go all over the country and have gone all over to film this for a Bigger Vision Films. Again, 1 week from today is when it's going to take place. And then after that, Don, we can get back to figuring out how the Pacers are going to get Andrew Nembhard and Tyrese Halliburton an NBA title, right?
Yeah, we need a roughneck. That's what we need. We need Dale Davis or somebody.
You know what? I like that. An enforcer, right? I thought Daniel Tice was going to be it a year ago. It didn't work out. They still need an enforcer, but they get that, they're good to go, right?
Yep, we're good to go after that.
All right, Don, I appreciate it, and certainly look forward to it. A week from today, 4:30 is when this is going to take place. Doors open at 3 o'clock at Clues Hall. Any questions, folks, you all have my cell phone number. You can text me. I will gladly send you all of the information, and it is something that I think is going to be a very important view for all. Don, appreciate it today.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it.
All right, it's my buddy Don Sawyer joining us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. Look, I think I mentioned this before, and then we'll get back to talking about sports, but I guess it was 2 years ago, something like that, and thank you to Hotbox Pizza for making this possible for me. But I did the program that I did called 30 Lunches in 30 Days, where every day for 30 straight days I had lunch with a different homeless person in downtown Indianapolis. And then at permission of those individuals and in partnership with Wheeler Mission, who helped facilitate it for me, I told the story as to the journey that led people to living on the street. And the number one thing, I think of the 30 people that I talked with, I'd have to go back and look at it, but I believe 27 of the 30 in talking to them had childhood trauma. That was the number one most common theme. And I think it is just so easy to dismiss people of, hey, they got their own problems, they got their own issues, they made a couple of bad mistakes. So often I found the people that I was talking to, it was not that they themselves made mistakes, it was that mistakes were placed upon them or they were labeled at a very young age as being someone else's mistake. And that stigma was so difficult for them to overcome that it was difficult for them to then be able to go out and every day just live with the pride that most people have because they never found it within themselves. And it just became a snowball effect. And so I've always had a soft spot for it. I appreciate Don's work in that. And again, a couple of different cities that have really made an impact. I think Don is hoping that that message has resonated and facilitated in bettering this city, which is one, obviously, that I know all of you, but myself in particular, have a great love and pride for. We'll come back. We'll put a tie on all of it and get Jimmy's plays of the day on the other side here of Query & Company at 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Today's plays of the day will start first with an old staple as they begin a set against the Washington Nationals. We'll take the Baltimore Orioles.
Hey, root for me.
Thank you, Ed.
A.k.a. Cute Fella to win on the money line over the Washington Nationals. We'll also take the Toronto Blue Jays to an outright over the Los Angeles Angels. Last one for you. Give me the Atlanta Braves on the road against the San Francisco Giants. Eddie, any bets for you?
No. Reds got a win last night, which is always nice.
That's always nice. Those are your plays of the day. Brought to you, of course, by our friends at Greenfield Signs and Lighting.
How many runs the White Sox put up on the Yankees today? I'm sorry, say the sponsor again.
Greenfield Signs and Lighting, greenfieldsigns.com, professional comprehensive sign company. 2 locations in central Indiana. Family owned and operated for more than 4 generations. They'll help you make a great first impression over at Greenfield Signs.
I have made a terrible first impression in terms of my usually quick-witted math skills because I keep saying 41 years ago today for Fast Times.
Yeah.
It came out in 82, so it was 42 years ago today.
You want a couple of good stories about that?
Sure.
All right. So I never saw Fast Times at the theater. I saw it when it was released on home video because when it was released, it came out at the same week, I think, with a film called Wacko. Wacko, a Joe Don Baker, I believe,
Fitting,
called
considering
Wacko.
one of the key scenes, but yes, go ahead.
And so I went to see Wacko instead of Fast Times at Ridgemont High. And then when it came out on video, I rented it and watched it. And my mom sat there and watched it with me. And I'm 12 years old, and this is 100% truth. When they got to the Brad Hamilton self-gratification scene, my mom said, "Do you do this to me?" She said, "Do you do this?" Of course, I lied like hell. I said, No, I don't touch it other than to. So I was just lying. Lie.
That's not uncomfortable
But yeah, she
at all,
asked me,
right?
she asked me right there. She said, Do you do that? And that during that scene.
Did you make it through the entire movie without it being stopped and yanked out of the VCR?
Nah, because my mom took me to a lot. Single mother took me to a lot of films, so I saw rated R movies before anybody else did.
I was going to say, I mean, if you had the option of seeing that,
like my first rated R movie was The Jerk with Steve Martin, and I was 9, so that was pretty impressive. And
so you did not obviously learn about its special purpose because.
Well, you think about Fast Times, and those types of scenes just kind of escalated, right? Because you went from, the whole. Ron Johnson in the dugout,
of course,
to the carrot. I think it went carrot to Ron Johnson. Yeah, right. So
now, I asked Eddie this earlier. If there was a character in Fast Times at Ridgemont High that most likely would have been the one, like your crowd in high school would have been, you would have been hanging out with which character?
Jefferson's little brother.
Okay.
Yeah, probably Jefferson's little brother. Because, he was a great hang. You know that in real life, he was an offensive coordinator in the Arena Football League, I believe.
His little brother was?
Yeah. I forget what his name is right now, but the actor who in real life was an offensive coordinator, I think, for Chicago, for their Arena League team or for some team.
But we do know that Chicago's not his favorite band and said it was Earth, Wind, and Fire, right?
Yeah, and little brother.
He was
an actual he was a football guy. So
he's a good-looking kid too, right?
Yeah, good-looking kid.
Innovative as well. Knows where all the parties are.
One critic wrote about Wacko. Wacko virtually vanished from the face of the earth, which, as it turns out, isn't necessarily a bad thing.
I know. Well, Andrew Dice Clay was in Wacko.
Really?
Seriously? That was I think he was in there.
Yep.
It was like 7 years before he started.
Credited as Andrew Clay.
Real,
yeah, he did Little Miss Muffet and all that stuff.
Man, once the funny thing about Andrew Dice Clay, when I look back on his whole shtick, I mean, he burst onto the scene like a brush fire, right? And everybody was doing the nursery rhymes and all of that. But literally, it almost everybody simultaneously one day just went, does he have another act? Or is this it?
Yeah.
And it just kind of wear itself out, right?
Didn't he do himself in on a Saturday Night Live once upon a time or something? I think
that's
too?
right, because
he had kind of a defining moment where he did himself in.
If I'm not mistaken, was he the one that went on, it might have been SNL, and they put a limit on things that he couldn't say, and he violated it?
Yeah, right. I think you had that, and then he came out at the same time as Kinnison, and then, Kinnison was like the Kurt Cobain of comics.
Oh, yeah.
He burst on the scene, was, oh, my goodness,
changed everything,
and then,
correct.
He died, and that was that. But Now, he came out at the same time as Kinnison. But no, Andrew Dice Clay, I saw Ford Fairlane, that film of his, because once he gained that notoriety and popularity, they put him right in an awful film.
Totally.
And they put him in Ford Fairlane. I saw that at the Bloomington Von Lee.
Now, which was worse, Ford Fairlane with him or Stone Cold with Brian Bosworth? Speaking of guys,
Stone Cold was awesome. I love Stone Cold. You don't like Stone Cold?
We're just going to airdrop guys in and make a movie out of them.
I love Stone Cold.
Okay.
They had that whole biker in Mississippi. That was like perfect.
I'll tell you, speaking of bikes and comics, I'll tell you a movie that, and again, you want to talk about watershed moments that ended a guy's career, but I thought was fabulous, was Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Should I not admit that I thought Pee-wee's Big Adventure was awesome?
No, I never liked it. You believe that?
Are you kidding me?
I did not like it.
I thought it was great.
Everybody always says, and luckily with Premier Weight Loss, I'm losing weight.
This is the private club with the Saints
everybody tells me I look like Francis, and I look like the fat guy, and
he's Francis. What's
Teen
the hair?
Wolf.
It's the hair.
Yeah,
he's the same guy that also is part of the couple that gets the last babka in Seinfeld, right?
Yeah, he was
Chocolate
that,
babka.
and he was Teen Wolf, and he was John Wayne Gacy in a film too.
Yeah, you were doing okay till the last one there, right?
John Wayne Gacy.
Like at that point,
you look like John Wayne Gacy. All right, great. Let me get a new hairstyle then.
At that point, you probably the Gacy part, like you're okay telling people that you look like. To that point,
I don't. Yeah, people would like make fun of me and say you look like the fat dude in Teen Wolf. I go, wait. So thank you, Premier Weight Loss, and my guy Thomas.
Player, right?
Yeah, so we're going to do something about that now. So I'm going to look more like, what's his name that was in Can't Buy Me Love that played on Michael J. Fox's team in Teen Wolf. Remember the whole team? Doug Savant from Melrose Place.
I love the fact that all of those movies were filmed in the same gym.
It was.
Which is like the same gym where they filmed A Season on the Brink, which is the worst basketball scenes of all time, right?
Well, it looked like the same gym where they Forrest Gump when he's playing ping pong.
Correct, it does.
And it has a three-point line, and you knew that it wasn't of that era.
So what's on the big show today, John?
Devin Mockabee, running back, junior, Purdue.
Okay.
Noted mechanic, car aficionado, and gearhead. I'm going to try to get him an NIL deal with like Snap-on Tools or something.
He absolutely, that dude was a bruising
Yes,
player,
Boonville, Indiana, Southern Indiana guy. Kravitz is on here. What's this guy's name? John Walkenfuss played for the Tigers back in the day. He was a catcher. Josh Winefuss, right? He covers the Cardinals.
You can ask him what happened
Not
last
John
night.
Walkenfuss.
Ask him what happened last night with the White Sox and Jimmy's Yankees. It was great.
Yeah.
All right,
Jimmy.
John will carry you home. We will be back with you at noon tomorrow. Thank you so much for listening to Query & Company.